The highway remembers what we try to forget. Every mile marker, every bend in the road carries the weight of screams swallowed by asphalt and headlights that never made it home. Tonight, I'll take you down those stretches of blacktop where the dead still wait for a ride, where the stations vanish and where the road itself refuses to let you go. These are the most disturbing true highway horror stories. The storm was the kind of storm that made the highway feel alive, thrashing against the windshield, hammering the roof of the car with fists of rain. Headlights barely cut through the downpour, and I had been driving for hours, half numb, when I saw her at the mile marker. A girl standing in the grass, no umbrella, no coat, just soaked through to her skin. Her hair clung to her face, and when she raised her arm, thumb trembling in the lightning flash, something inside me told me to keep going. But I didn't. I slowed, rolled to a stop, and she climbed in without a word. Her clothes were plastered to her body, dripping a small puddle onto my passenger seat. She shivered violently, whispering only, "Just a ride." The words carried no emotion, no urgency, just flat as if spoken from rote memory. I nodded, pulled back onto the road, but she didn't look at me. She stared out the rain-streaked window, eyes lost in the blackness beyond the glass. The silence inside that car was different from the storm outside. Heavier. It pressed in like a weight on my chest. My radio had fizzled out half an hour earlier, and now the only sound was the mechanical sweep of the wipers, the hum of tires, and the soft drip of rainwater from her hair. Every so often, lightning lit up her face, pale and unreadable. She didn't glance at me once. I tried to break the silence, asked her name, where she was headed, if she was all right. Each question hung in the air like smoke, ignored, absorbed by the storm. Finally, she whispered, "Turn left up ahead." Her voice had the cadence of someone repeating a line learned long ago. I knew the highway. There was no left turn where she pointed, just a narrow gravel path barely visible through the downpour. Against reason, I followed it. The gravel crunched under my tires, the car jolting on the uneven road. Trees crowded close on either side, their branches clawing at the roof as if to pull us deeper into the dark. I stole a glance at her. She hadn't moved, her eyes fixed forward, lips pressed thin. The air in the car was colder now, my breath visible with every exhale. Her shivering had stopped, but that was somehow worse. She sat utterly still, soaked clothes clinging, but her chest barely seemed to rise or fall with breath. I felt the hair at the back of my neck rise when I noticed something strange. In the streaked blur of the windshield, her reflection in the glass did not move with her. The angle was wrong, her head tilted slightly the other way, her lips forming words that no sound carried. I tightened my grip on the wheel, throat dry. "Here," she whispered suddenly, and her voice cracked with an edge of desperation. I looked ahead and saw nothing but deeper woods. No lights, no houses, no sign of any destination. I started to protest, to say we should turn back. But when I looked at her again, she was smiling. Wide, too wide. The next moment, the passenger seat was empty, rainwater still dripping onto the cushion. My knuckles whitened against the wheel. But I couldn't bring myself to stop. Not then, not after seeing that smile. And in the glass of the windshield, through the wash of rain, her reflection still sat beside me. Her absence in the seat lasted only a breath, and then she was back, dripping wet as if she had never left. My eyes flicked to the mirror, to the glass, to her reflection that seemed sharper than her body beside me. I wanted to convince myself it was the storm, the exhaustion, but before I could speak, She leaned forward and whispered, "Exit here." Her finger rose, pale and rigid, pointing toward a ramp barely visible through the curtain of rain. I followed, though I cannot tell you why. My gut told me no sane person would take that turn, not with the road dissolving under the downpour. The ramp curved hard, leading us away from the lights of the main highway, swallowing us into blackness where the only glow came from my own headlights. The girl sat back against the seat, water still dripping steadily, and murmured, "Keep going." Her voice was flat, steady, not fragile or frightened as it should have been, but practiced, like she had rehearsed this journey 100 times before. Each direction she gave pulled us farther from where I wanted to be. The exits grew smaller, narrower, paths unmarked, abandoned. My GPS screen flickered between lost signals, blank maps, and frozen arrows spinning in place. The rain eased, but the fog thickened, curling across the road like it wanted to hide what lay ahead. She pointed again. Left, right, straight through. Each instruction came without pause, like she knew every crack in the asphalt. My hands gripped the wheel tighter with every turn. The air smelled different now, not wet concrete or diesel fumes, but something older, stale as though no car had passed through here in years. I glanced out the window and realized the mile markers had stopped. The last one I had seen was 42. Now there were none. Just the empty stretch of road and the trees pressing closer, branches clawing overhead. "Do you know where this goes?" I asked, though my voice sounded small, eaten by the fog. She turned to me then. Her eyes caught the faint reflection of the dashboard lights, pale and blank. "Nowhere," she whispered. And the way she said it, without hesitation, without doubt, made my stomach twist. Not a warning, not a threat, just a statement of fact. I thought about pulling over, about telling her to get out. But the wheel felt locked beneath my hands, as though something beyond me was guiding it. Every time I slowed, her head tilted, and she would murmur another direction, flat and certain. The storm outside had given way to silence, but inside the car, the quiet pressed thicker than any rain. When I risked another glance, her lips were moving even when no sound came, practicing the words, repeating them over and over in silence, as if she had been saying them for years, waiting for another driver foolish enough to stop at her mile marker. And for the first time that night, I realized with certainty I was not her first ride. The road narrowed into a snake's coil, the kind of turn that demanded every ounce of attention. Yet I could not stop flicking glances at her. She sat so rigidly still, her soaked dress clinging to her frame, lips moving faintly like she was whispering to someone I could not hear. The fog pressed against the windshield, thick and white, swallowing the world beyond the curve. My hands sweated against the wheel as I followed her instructions, each one dragging me deeper into nowhere. At the sharpest bend yet, I let my eyes slip away from the asphalt for only a second. I do not even remember why. Perhaps to check the mirror, perhaps to look at her again. But when I turned my head back, the passenger seat was empty. The wet imprint of her body remained on the cushion, water still dripping in slow rhythm to the mat below. But she was gone. My throat closed, my pulse hammering in my ears. I yanked my gaze to the back seat, to the floor, to the dark beyond the fogged glass, half expecting her face pressed there against the window. Nothing. I swallowed hard and whispered her name, though I realized with a jolt I had never known it. Only her directions, those rehearsed words, those flat whispers. The silence that answered felt heavier than her presence had. I gripped the wheel tighter, the car swaying dangerously close to the guardrail as the bend tightened. And then a sound. Faint, but close. A dripping whisper, like water trickling not onto the floor, but onto fabric. I dared a glance at the passenger seat again. The wet outline of her body was spreading, not fading, spreading as though water was bleeding outward, soaking the seat, the floor, the console between us. The smell of damp earth filled the cabin, raw and cloying as though the rainstorm had been dragged inside. My headlights cut across another curve, and for an instant, the fog thinned. On the side of the road, standing inches from the guardrail, she was there. The same soaked figure, hair plastered to her face, eyes locked on mine as though she had never left the car at all. I jerked the wheel, nearly sending the car into the ditch, and when the lights leveled again, she was gone. But the passenger seat was not empty anymore. The waterlogged cushion sank, indented as though someone had just sat down again. My peripheral vision caught movement, a shadow shifting where no body sat. I could not bring myself to look directly. My chest heaved, my knuckles white on the wheel. I told myself to keep driving, not to look, not to acknowledge, but in the corner of my eye, the shape leaned closer. A face, pale and dripping, inches from mine. Though, when I turned, there was nothing. And still, the sound of breath too close to my ear. The car felt colder with every mile, as though the heater had given up against something creeping in from outside. My breath fogged the air, curling against the glass, but hers did not. The passenger seat still sagged, soaked through, indent heavy with a body that wasn't there. I kept my eyes pinned to the road, but the sense of her leaning closer, brushing just past my shoulder, was unbearable. Then the sound began again, dripping slow and deliberate, landing not on the floor this time, but higher, closer. I risked a glance, and my blood froze. Wet footprints were pressed against the dashboard. Not shoes, bare feet, small, pale, each one glistening as though freshly lifted from a stream. They were wrong in their angle, toes pointing upward, arching higher and higher across the dash. My chest tightened. The prints didn't stop. They trailed toward the windshield itself, fading as if she had stepped straight into the glass. Lightning ripped across the sky, illuminating the interior. For an instant, I swore I saw her. Her silhouette inside the windshield, body pressed against the glass like it was water instead of solid pain. Her hair floated as though submerged, her hands spread wide, her eyes wide open and staring through me. Then the lightning died, and the windshield was just streaked with rain again. My grip on the wheel faltered, the car swerving before I corrected, but the prints remained. They glowed faintly under the dash lights, each step dissolving into the glass. I reached out a trembling hand, fingertips brushing the damp mark closest to me. It was cold, too cold. And when I pulled my hand back, water clung to my skin, tasting of iron when I reflexively touched it to my lips. The radio crackled to life, though I hadn't touched it. Static hissed, sputtering, and beneath it came a voice. Not words, not yet, but the wet, ragged inhale of someone climbing, straining upward, like her breath was in the wires. My headlights flickered, casting shadows that moved wrong, shifting not with the sway of the trees, but with something crawling over the roof of the car. I pressed harder on the accelerator, heart racing as the engine groaned. The mile markers were gone now, swallowed in fog, but still I pushed forward, desperate for any sign of an exit, a town, another living soul. The static broke with a whisper. My name, spoken not from the radio speakers, but from directly above my head. I dared a glance upward and saw condensation dripping down the inside of the roof liner. slow trails forming the shape of hands pressing outward. They smeared downward like she was crawling across the ceiling, dragging her weight closer and closer to where I sat. The windshield pulsed in the corner of my vision, rippling like the surface of water. Her pale face swam just beneath, mouth opening wider, wider, as if she was trying to pull me in. And then the first hairline crack split across the glass, spidering outward from where her foot had pressed last. The crack in the windshield spread like a vein, thin threads racing outward with every bump in the road. I kept waiting for it to shatter inward, to spill her fully into the car. But it never broke. It just pulsed faintly with each flash of lightning, her outline swimming beneath the glass like she was biding her time. I drove faster, knuckles bone white, heart slamming against my ribs. The fog thinned at last, and up ahead, neon lights buzzed through the darkness, a rest stop. Relief came sharp and foolish. I pulled in too fast, tires hissing on wet asphalt, and slid into a space near the empty pumps. The building was dark, closed for the night, but the lights hummed above it, throwing sickly yellow against the mist. I shut the engine off, desperate for silence, but the dripping didn't stop. Footsteps echoed inside the car. I turned slowly, afraid of what I might see. The passenger seat was dry now. The footprints had vanished. No water stains, no indent in the cushion, nothing to prove she had ever been there at all. Even the cracks in the windshield were gone, replaced by clean, perfect glass. My breathing sounded unnatural in the quiet. I opened the door, stepped out into the drizzle, and half stumbled toward the bathroom stalls just to get away from the suffocating interior. The air outside was fresher, though no less cold. I leaned against the wet brick wall, trying to steady myself, convincing myself that exhaustion had warped the night, that I had fallen into some half-dream on the road. I almost believed it, until I noticed the mile marker. Not far down the shoulder, just past the entrance ramp, it stood crooked in the grass, number painted dull and weather-worn. And beside it, her. She was exactly as she had been when I first saw her. Drenched, trembling, arm outstretched, thumb raised toward the road. Her hair clung to her face, her eyes hollow but steady, waiting. My stomach turned to stone. She didn't look at me, didn't acknowledge the car she had already ridden in, the ride that had nearly broken me. She just waited, silent, still, as if I had never existed at all. Headlights flared in the distance, a pair of approaching beams cutting through the mist. A truck slowed, tires splashing as it approached the marker. Her thumb stayed raised, her eyes never wavered. And as the vehicle drew near, I saw her reflection in the glass of my own windshield behind me, her face smiling, wide and hungry. I staggered back, pulse rattling my throat, as the truck eased to a stop. The door opened. She turned her head at last, not toward me, but toward her next driver, lips curling into the same too wide smile I had seen in the lightning. And I understood then. She would keep waiting, keep riding, again and again. She had been doing this long before me, and she would go on long after. The storm swallowed the highway once more, and she lifted her dripping body into the truck's cab, vanishing from view. But as it pulled away, I swore I saw her already standing at the next mile marker, thumb raised, waiting still. It began on a stretch of highway so empty, it felt like the world had folded in on itself. Midnight pressed down heavy, the road ahead swallowed by fog, and my headlights carved a thin, trembling line through the dark. I had not seen another car in miles, not even the faint glow of taillights. That's why when the glare flared up in my rearview mirror, it startled me so badly my hands jerked on the wheel. A semi. Its headlights burned white hot, too bright, like furnace doors cracked open. They filled the mirror, searing my eyes, and I had to squint just to keep the car straight. The engine's hum was soon drowned out by the roar of its tires, thunderous and relentless, closing the distance without hesitation. I tapped the accelerator, but the truck matched my speed instantly, narrowing the space between us until its grille filled every inch of glass. I could make out no driver, only the looming mass of steel and light bearing down on me like a predator. My chest tightened, sweat dampening my palms. I changed lanes, hoping to let it roar past, but it swerved with me, perfectly synchronized. The horn bellowed then, deep and primal, rattling the bones in my chest. It wasn't just noise. It was a sound with intent, a warning, or maybe a promise. I gripped the wheel until my knuckles whitened, heart slamming in rhythm with the pulse of those monstrous lights. I pushed the gas harder. 90, then faster, the engine whining in protest. Still, it stayed locked behind me, no more than a car length away. The road was empty, the night endless, and yet this truck had chosen me. I could feel its focus, the weight of its attention pressing on the back of my skull. The fog thickened around us, curling through the beams of light until the world felt smothered. My mirrors showed nothing but the blinding glare, erasing the horizon. It was as though the highway had shrunk to just me, the car, and the beast of a truck breathing down my neck. I thought of pulling over, of slamming to a stop and letting it scream by. But every instinct screamed that if I did, it would not pass. It would not spare me. It would not let me go. The horn bellowed again, long and furious, shaking the air until the windshield vibrated. My chest rattled with it, breath breaking into shallow gasps. For one wild moment, I thought I heard something beneath the blast. A voice buried in the noise, low and guttural, calling my name. I blinked, and the reflection in the mirror shifted. For the briefest instant, the headlights weren't lights at all, but eyes, burning, unblinking, fixed on me with hunger. And then the truck surged closer, so near the heat of its engine seemed to seep into the cabin. The highway stretched on without end, but I knew, in that sick hollow part of my gut, that this truck wasn't bound by roads or rules. It wasn't chasing me, it was hunting me. The road stretched on like a wound, its white lines swallowed into the dark. My pulse hammered in my ears as I flicked on my turn signal and veered into the next lane, desperate to put space between myself and the monster at my back. For a moment, I thought it would pass me, that it would thunder on ahead and leave me in the silence of the storm-soaked night. But no. The semi shifted with me, a perfect reflection, its hulking body sliding across the asphalt as though tethered to my movements. I swerved again, sharper this time, nearly clipping the divider. It followed with flawless mimicry, headlights searing my vision, never losing pace, never faltering. It was not just tailing me. It was playing with me, testing me. Then came the horn, a sound so deep, so primal it felt like it split the marrow in my bones. It wasn't the blast of a trucker's warning, no. This was something else. An animal's bellow, guttural and furious, reverberating through the empty night. My chest tightened, every nerve in my body screaming that I wasn't just on a highway anymore. I was in something's hunting ground. The fog thickened, swirling like smoke under my headlights. The lane markers faded. I tried again to change lanes, to shake it, but it moved with me in perfect synchronization, each motion mocking my own. The sound of its tires on the wet asphalt roared louder than my engine, drowning out the pounding in my head. "Pass me!" I shouted at the mirror, as if the driver could hear me. but there was no driver, at least none I could see. The cab was black, windows reflecting nothing but the hollow glow of my own lights. Another blast of the horn, longer this time, and something shifted in the air. The glass rattled, the dashboard shook, and beneath the blast I heard something impossible. A rhythm, almost like a chant, woven through the sound. My name again, my name, stretched and distorted, called out from a throat too deep to belong to anything human. I gripped the wheel until my knuckles burned, forcing the car faster. The needle climbed higher than it had in years, the engine screaming. But the truck's lights never shrank. It hung behind me, inches away, like it was being dragged on a chain straight from hell itself. The thought came unbidden. If I stopped, even for a second, those lights would swallow me. Not just my car, not just my body, but me. The idea rooted in my brain and refused to leave. I could almost feel the heat of the grill pressing against my spine, almost hear breath where there should have been machinery. The horn sounded again, so close it felt like it erupted from inside my chest. My vision blurred with tears and sweat. But in the mirror, the lights wavered, not as beams of fire, but as eyes, red, swollen, and endless, staring directly into mine. And they blinked. The speedometer needle trembled as I slammed the accelerator to the floor. The engine shrieked, straining, the car shuddering beneath me as though the frame might rattle apart. The road blurred into a smear of white lines and darkness, but still it wasn't enough. The truck was there, impossibly close, its grille towering in my rearview mirror like a steel wall poised to crush me flat. The air inside the car grew hot, suffocating, as if its furnace heat was bleeding straight through the glass. My chest burned with every breath. Sweat slid down my neck, soaking the collar of my shirt. The roar of its engine filled every space, vibrating through the bones in my skull until my teeth ached. I prayed for it to lag, for my speed to matter. But it clung to me with unnatural precision, closing the distance until I could make out every detail of the grillwork. The emblem had been scraped away, leaving only a jagged scar of rust that looked almost like a mouth, jagged and grinning. The headlights flared, not just bright, but alive, each pulse searing the mirror until my eyes watered. I tried to swerve, to shake it, but the truck followed with flawless rhythm, never falling back, never surging forward to pass. It wanted me here, pinned in this space, trapped between its heat and the endless black of the road ahead. The horn bellowed again, so loud it made my ribs vibrate. My ears rang, the sound bleeding into something more than noise. There were layers in it, voices buried beneath the blast, whispering, chanting, calling me to stop, to give in, to let it fold me into its furnace body. The fog thinned briefly, revealing a sign on the roadside. I only caught it for a second before it vanished into the dark, but my blood went cold. Mile marker 69. The same one I had passed 10 minutes ago. The same bent post, the same chipped paint. I hadn't escaped at all. The road was looping. My heart thrashed. I floored the gas harder, though the car trembled dangerously, the steering wheel quivering like it might slip free of my hands. The truck loomed closer, closer, until its lights were no longer behind me, but around me, spilling into the car itself. I blinked, and for one sickening instant, the rearview mirror didn't show the grill. It showed faces, dozens of them, pressed against glass, mouths open in silent screams, skin lit by furnace glow. They weren't looking at the road. They were looking at me. I jerked my gaze back forward, but the road ahead was gone. Only black, only fog, and the impossible weight of that truck filling the universe behind me. The tires screamed on the asphalt as I clung to the wheel, every nerve burning with one truth that drowned out reason. It didn't matter how fast I went. There was no outrunning something that wanted my soul more than my body. The roar behind me swelled until it was all I could hear, the kind of sound that felt like it was peeling the skin from my bones. My car shuddered as though the massive grille had already touched the bumper, about to shove me into oblivion. I braced for impact, for the crushing weight, for the inevitable end of metal folding into fire. And then, nothing. The sound vanished. No horn, no engine, no grinding tires. The headlights that had burned into my skull blinked out in an instant, leaving the mirror black and empty. I nearly veered off the road, my hands fighting the sudden stillness, my ears ringing in the vacuum of silence. I slowed, heart still clawing at my ribs, waiting for the crash that should have already come. But there was only the whisper of my own tires on the wet asphalt, the hum of my engine straining too high. Behind me stretched nothing but fog and darkness. The semi was gone. I pulled to the shoulder, chest heaving, sweat cold against my back. My headlights carved trembling beams into the mist, but no red glow followed, no searing white flood from behind. I stepped out of the car on shaky legs, desperate to prove to myself that it was over. The night was eerily still, the air holding the damp smell of rain, but no sound of diesel, no vibration of a massive engine lingering in the ground. I crept back to where I thought it had been, expecting to see skid marks torn into the asphalt. There was nothing. The road was clean, unbroken, not a single scar of rubber, as if no truck had ever existed at all. The silence pressed heavier with each breath. It wasn't peace, it was expectation. A pause before something worse. The fog drifted across the highway, curling like smoke, and I swore it moved with intent, sliding close enough to touch my skin before retreating. I climbed back into the car, locking the doors though I couldn't explain why. My hands trembled on the wheel, eyes flicking from mirror to windshield, back and forth, hunting for those furnace lights to return. The emptiness behind me felt worse than the chase. At least when the truck was there, I knew where the threat lived. Now the dark was bottomless, a mouth waiting to swallow me whole. I eased forward, engine whispering low now, every nerve straining for the slightest sound. But there was nothing. No cicadas, no owls, no distant hum of life. Just my heartbeat, deafening in the stillness. When the mile marker appeared out of the fog, I slowed, hands slick against the wheel, my blood iced over. It was the same one. Mile marker 69, bent post, chipped paint. I had not moved forward at all. And for the briefest second, in the reflection of the glass, I saw it again. Not the truck, not the grill, but the glow of the headlights burning inside the fog, not behind me, above me, as though it had never left, as though it was circling back. The silence clung to me tighter than the roar had. My car rolled on, headlights trembling across the fog-drowned asphalt, the world reduced to a narrow strip of wet road and the pounding in my chest. Every muscle ached from bracing for an impact that never came, but I couldn't relax. The air was too still. It wasn't relief I felt, it was dread, stretched taut, waiting for the sound to return. The highway bent long and slow, the fog lifting just enough for me to see farther ahead. That's when I spotted them. Black scars torn into the pavement, jagged arcs etched deep into the road's skin. Tire marks wide and heavy, like something had slammed its brakes and fought the earth itself. I slowed, unwilling but unable to pass without looking. The marks gouged the asphalt in violent streaks, the rubber ground into the stone. I followed them with my eyes, pulse rattling harder with every yard. They ran straight, wild, and then stopped. Abruptly. No curve, no ditch, no crash, just nothing. The black streaks ended at open road, as though the truck had simply vanished mid-scream. I pulled over, trembling hands tightening uselessly around the wheel. My headlights bled over the road's torn skin, catching steam still rising faintly from the gouges. Fresh. Recent. Too recent. The smell of burnt rubber lingered sharp in the air, acrid and stinging, as though the chase had ended seconds ago. I forced the door open and stepped into the damp night. The silence was unbearable. I crouched near the end of the skid marks, my breath fogging the air, eyes tracing where they should have continued. But the road ahead was untouched, smooth as glass, no hint of impact or wreckage, not a splinter, not a shard, not a drop of oil. And then I noticed the detail that froze my blood solid. The marks weren't just cut into the road, they were seared into it. Charred grooves, edges glowing faintly red as though the tires had burned hotter than flame. I touched the pavement with my fingertips and hissed, scalding. My gaze drifted up, slowly, against my will. The fog throbbed faintly with light. Not behind me this time, not around me, above. For one fractured instant, I thought I saw it suspended in the mist, wheels spinning, headlights glaring down like the eyes of something too vast to belong to the earth. And then the glow dissolved, folding into the clouds as if swallowed whole. I stumbled back to the car, heart in my throat, fumbling with a handle like a trapped animal. Once inside, I locked the doors, knowing locks meant nothing but desperate habit. My headlights pointed forward, illuminating the road where the black scars ended. The air shimmered faintly, rippling like heat above asphalt. The mile marker stood just ahead, crooked and pale in the mist. And carved deep into the metal, jagged letters glared back at me, still smoking. My name. The silence broke then. Not with an engine, not with a horn, but with a low growl that came from everywhere at once, a promise I would never escape. The truck hadn't stopped. It was only waiting. The needle hit empty just as the rain thickened, smearing the windshield with silver sheets that made the highway dissolve into shadow. I cursed under my breath, heart pounding with the thought of being stranded in this stretch of nowhere. Then, through the curtain of rain, I saw it. Not a gas station, not a diner, just a phone booth. It stood crooked beside the mile marker, glowing faint green in the mist, its light buzzing faintly like an insect caught in glass. The rest of the world was swallowed by storm and black trees, yet here this relic stood, waiting, untouched by time. My tires hissed as I pulled over, gravel popping beneath them, the car coughing on its last drops of fuel. The booth's glass panes were slick with condensation, the glow from inside soft and unnatural. It reminded me of the aquarium lights from my childhood. Too steady, too perfect, a light that didn't flicker even when the storm raged. The mile marker beside it leaned at an odd angle, the numbers barely visible beneath layers of rust. I killed the engine and sat for a moment, hands locked on the wheel, staring. My phone was useless. No bars, just dead silence. The nearest town had to be miles away, and the booth, though out of place, felt like my only option. When I stepped out, the rain hit me cold and heavy, soaking through in seconds. The booth hummed louder the closer I came, vibrating in my ears like a low frequency only half heard. My shoes slapped the wet pavement, then the slick grass, until I stood inches from the door. The handle gleamed slick with rainwater, but colder than it should have been when I wrapped my fingers around it. I pulled the door open, and the smell of damp metal and dust wafted out, mixed with something sweeter. Rotting flowers, maybe, or old perfume left to sour. Inside, the receiver dangled from its cord, swinging faintly, though there was no wind in the glass box. The glow was brighter from within, bathing everything in a strange emerald hue. The seat of my stomach turned, but my hand lifted anyway, fingers brushing the receiver. The moment my skin touched it, the booth came alive. The dial tone wailed through the line, loud and shrill, making me flinch. Then, just as suddenly, it cut off. The phone began to ring. I froze. The sound wasn't muffled or distant. It was sharp, insistent, filling the booth with its echo. I hadn't dialed. No one had. The line was calling me. My heart thudded against my ribs, every nerve screaming to leave, to get back into my car and vanish down the endless road. But the booth felt like it had me by the throat, drawing me closer. The receiver swung gently, brushing against my arm, demanding. The light above flickered once, twice, then steadied, buzzing louder than before. And through the ring, muffled and strange, I thought I heard a voice already waiting on the other end, whispering my name. The ringing drilled through me, sharp and unnatural in the close glass box. Each chime seemed to vibrate, in my bones, louder than the storm outside, cutting through the steady drum of rain on the roof. I stood frozen with the door half open, the wet grass clinging to my shoes, the night pressing cold against my back. The phone swung gently on its cord, the receiver's mouthpiece pointing at me like an eye that expected an answer. I told myself not to. Every instinct screamed that nothing good waited on the other end of that line. But the booth hummed, the green glow thickening, and I felt pulled inward as if gravity itself had shifted. Before I realized it, I was inside, the door clicking shut behind me. The ringing didn't echo like normal. It filled the air, a sound that was everywhere at once. My trembling hand reached for the receiver, and as my fingers brushed the slick plastic, the noise cut off. Silence hit harder than the storm, pressing tight in the booth, the kind that made your ears strain to hear what wasn't there. Then came the click. It was soft, deliberate, the sound of someone on the other side lifting their own receiver. My heart slammed in my chest. For a moment, neither of us spoke. Only the faint hiss of the line, static like shallow breath, stretched across the distance between us. "Hello?" My voice cracked. It sounded small, swallowed instantly by the booth. The answer came low and steady, and the words nearly made me drop the phone. "Why did you stop?" I pressed the receiver harder to my ear, swallowing back the surge of panic. The voice was my own, not just familiar, identical. It spoke with my cadence, my tone, as though I were listening to a recording of myself. "Who is this?" I demanded, but it asked again, perfect in every syllable. "Why did you stop?" I could hear the rain behind me in the line, echoing like I was on delay, standing a few seconds in the past. My breath rattled, and the same rattle came through the phone, too close, too in sync. The line wasn't reaching out. It was folding in, connecting me to myself. The booth grew colder. Condensation bled down the glass walls, streaking the green glow. My reflection stared back from the pane, pale, blurred, but wrong. Its lips were moving, not with me, but ahead of me, whispering words I hadn't said yet. My grip tightened on the receiver. "What do you want?" The answer came instantly, flat, steady, inevitable. "I want to finish what you started." The line cracked with static, and underneath I heard something else, the sound of the booth door creaking, but not the one I had just closed. It came from the phone, from wherever this voice was calling. The slow grind of glass hinges opening, letting something in. And when the silence settled again, I realized the breathing I heard wasn't through the line anymore. It was behind me. The receiver felt heavier the longer I held it, like the cord was pulling me down into the floor. I didn't want to raise it to my ear again, but I couldn't stop myself. The line hissed, softly, the static thick as wet sand. And then I heard it, my own voice. Not echoing, not delayed, speaking in perfect time with me. "You're holding the phone," it said, even as my knuckles whitened around the handle. "Your hand is shaking. You're pressing it too hard against your ear. You're breathing faster now." I froze, lungs burning as though the air had been yanked out of me. My chest rose, and the voice followed. "You just took another breath. You're swallowing hard. You're trying not to speak because you don't want to hear yourself answer." Every detail it whispered was true, down to the smallest twitch of my fingers, the faint scrape of my shoe against the metal booth floor. It was like it was inside me, cataloging me moment by moment, stripping me bare. "Stop it," I said, the words trembling out of me. "Stop it," the voice repeated instantly, in my tone, with my stutter, my quiver. The line crackled with my fear, feeding it back to me. "You don't want to hear the rest. You don't want to know what you're about to do." I slammed my free hand against the glass, needing something real, something solid to anchor me. The booth shook faintly, the glow trembling across my reflection. But my reflection wasn't moving with me anymore. Its lips stretched into a slow, curling smile while mine stayed rigid. The voice on the line laughed then, low and breathless, exactly how I laughed when I was nervous. "You're looking at yourself now. You're realizing the glass doesn't match. You're finally noticing the difference." My throat closed, panic flooding me. "Who are you?" The answer was sharp, immediate. "I'm you, but I see further than you do." My reflection's eyes widened as though hearing the words too, but not with fear, delight. It pressed a palm against the glass, leaving a smear of condensation. A beat later, I felt my own hand grow damp, as if something pressed back from the other side. The voice began again, steady as heartbeat, narrating me in real time. "You're sweating down your spine. Your grip is slipping. You're afraid to hang up because you know I'll keep talking even without the phone." The static surged, filling the line with a roar like rushing water, and the voice shouted over it, my voice stretched too thin. "You're about to drop the phone. Right now." The receiver slipped from my grasp and swung wildly on the cord, clattering against the glass wall. My reflection didn't move. Its hand stayed pressed against the pane, its smile too wide, lips still forming words. And in the echoing booth, with the receiver swaying, I heard my own voice continue, soft and steady, not from the line, but from the glass itself. "You're not going anywhere." The receiver swung in slow arcs, thudding softly against the glass wall, the cord twisting and untwisting like something alive. I pressed my back to the booth, my breath rattling too loud in the small space. The line should have been dead the moment it slipped from my grip, but the voice never faltered. It whispered steadily, as calm as if it had been waiting for this moment all along. "You're stepping back now. You're pressing against the corner. Your palms are sweating. Your eyes won't leave the glass." The words crawled into me, precise, unavoidable, every single one true. I tried to fight it, to prove it wrong, but even the smallest movements were mirrored in the narration. When I forced my gaze toward the door, the voice purred, "You're looking for a way out. You think you'll run. You think you'll make it to your car. But you won't." The receiver clattered harder as the booth vibrated faintly, its green glow flickering just enough to thicken the shadows on the other side of the glass. My reflection moved again, lips forming words just before I heard them in the air. The voice described each twitch of my body, each ragged breath, each trembling thought. "You're thinking of bolting. Your hand is on the door now, but you won't open it. You can't, because you know what's waiting outside." I yanked at the handle, desperate to prove it wrong, but it held fast, the hinges locked as if welded shut. My chest seized with terror as the voice laughed, low and humorless. "See? You can't leave. You already knew that." My heart thundered, and I slammed my fists against the door. The glass rattled, but nothing gave. The storm outside had vanished. No rain, no wind, no sound at all. Just silence pressing on every side. Then the voice lowered, more intimate, almost kind. "You're about to turn around. You don't want to, but you will, because you'll hear it." And I did. A faint knock behind me, sharp and deliberate, against the opposite wall of the booth. I froze, breath stuck in my throat. Another knock, harder this time. My reflection pressed its face closer to the glass, mouth curling in anticipation. The voice whispered again, each word scraping the inside of my skull. "You're going to see it now? Right behind you, leaning close, waiting for you to notice." The knocks became scraping, fingernails dragging along the glass, circling me in a slow, steady rhythm. I felt the vibration against my spine, every nerve raw and screaming. The phone swayed still, the cord twisting until it tangled itself into knots, and the voice never stopped. It described the shiver in my legs, the sting in my eyes, the way my body shook though I tried to hold still. Then it whispered something new. Not what I was doing, but what was next. "You're about to scream." The scraping circled me, each drag of unseen nails vibrating the glass until it hummed in my bones. My throat clenched tight, every breath shallow, every instinct screaming not to move. But the voice coaxed me on, soft and certain. "You're about to turn. You'll do it now." And I did. Slowly, against my own will, I twisted in the narrow space. The green glow of the booth seemed to deepen, casting shadows that bent at wrong angles. My pulse hammered as my eyes lifted to the foggy glass and froze. Because standing there, just beyond the dripping pane, was me. I stared into my own face, pale and drenched, rain pouring down my hair and shoulders. My double stood impossibly still, hands at its sides, eyes locked to mine without a blink. The storm I thought had died was raging out there, yet its clothes hung dry, its skin too sharp in the fluorescent glow. The voice didn't come from the phone anymore. It came from outside, from the lips of the figure staring in. My lips, my voice, speaking in unison with the whispers curling in the booth. "You're looking at yourself. You're realizing you've already stepped outside." I stumbled back, spine hitting the opposite wall of the booth. The glass felt like ice. My reflection pressed a palm against the pane, and condensation bloomed outward in perfect handprint shapes. My breath rattled. On my side of the glass, I didn't raise a hand. But outside, the other me was already moving, pressing closer. The phone receiver swung violently now, clattering against the booth wall with sharp cracks. The voice doubled, tripled, filling the air, overlapping, each tone a different version of me, laughing, whispering, pleading, chanting. The sound became unbearable, like a crowd of myself pressing in, every word I had ever spoken spilling back into my ears. And then the outside figure smiled, wide, too wide. The corners of its mouth stretched unnaturally, teeth bared, gleaming in the flicker of green light. It tapped the glass once, twice, before its hand slid down, slow as a caress, leaving streaks of darkness instead of condensation. The booth vibrated with the sound of glass bending, groaning under pressure. I backed into the corner, heart slamming, but there was nowhere left to go. My own voice, from the other side, purred, "You can't hide in here. You're already out." Lightning flared in the distance, and for an instant the glass walls turned mirror clear. I saw both of us then, me trapped inside, me standing out in the rain. And yet neither belonged. The one outside leaned forward until its forehead pressed the glass, its grin splitting wider as though it knew the last truth. The booth light flickered, once, twice, then burned steady green again. And when it did, the inside of the booth was empty. I was the one standing outside, staring in. Then my double, the one inside, pressed its hand to the glass and whispered in my exact voice, "Your turn." The rain had eased into a mist, the kind that makes the highway shine like black glass. My headlights cut through it in narrow blades, catching the crooked mile markers and the dripping guardrails as I drifted further into nowhere. That's when he appeared. At first, I thought it was just another shadow bending wrong in the fog. Then it moved, stepping directly into the beam of my lights. A man, standing at the edge of the shoulder, soaked through, thumb raised high. His clothes hung in tatters, clinging to him like seaweed. But his face, God, his face, was lit up in a smile stretched too far. The teeth caught the light first, gleaming too white, too perfect, like polished bone under a dentist's lamp. I should have driven past. Every instinct screamed to keep the wheel steady, eyes forward, never slow down. But his smile hooked into me, held me. It wasn't friendly. It wasn't pleading. It was knowing. He smiled as if he already knew I'd stop, as if I had no choice. The car slowed against my will, brakes sighing, tires hissing on wet asphalt. He stepped closer, his grin never faltering. Those teeth looked endless, crowding his mouth, each one too sharp, too symmetrical. My chest tightened with dread, but my hand reached for the door lock anyway, like a puppet string had been pulled. He slid into the passenger seat without a word. The smell hit first, a sour tang, metallic, like old pennies kept too long in a damp drawer. His clothes were plastered to his frame, dripping steadily onto the floor mat. But he didn't shiver. He didn't blink. He just kept grinning, head tilted ever so slightly, teeth flashing in the glow of the dashboard. The silence between us was suffocating, thicker than the fog outside. I tried to ask where he was headed, tried to sound casual, normal, but the words felt brittle in my throat. He didn't answer. He just chuckled low, a sound that rattled, as though his laughter came from too many throats at once. Then his grin widened, if that was even possible, and he leaned closer. His breath was warm against my cheek, carrying that same metallic tang. When he finally spoke, the words were soft, almost playful. "Do you want to see what I've collected?" My stomach turned to stone. He reached for the satchel slung over his shoulder, the zipper rusted and frayed. His teeth glistened in the corner of my vision as his fingers toyed with the pull tab, dragging it slow, deliberate, savoring the sound. I couldn't look directly at him. Not yet. The smile in my periphery was already too much, too sharp, too full. The kind of smile that promised I hadn't just picked up a stranger. I had picked up a predator, and his teeth weren't just for smiling. The wipers dragged across the glass in their tired rhythm, the only sound cutting through the silence. The man sat slouched beside me, rainwater dripping steadily from his sleeves, pooling at his feet. He hadn't stopped smiling since he'd climbed in, his teeth too bright in the dim cabin glow. Finally, I forced myself to break the quiet. "Where are you headed?" My voice felt dry, splintered, as if the words had to fight their way out. He turned his head slowly, that grin fixed like it was carved into him. "Forward," he said, pausing far too long before adding, "Isn't that where we're all headed?" Then he laughed, not at the words, not at a joke, just at the sound of his own voice, a choked, rattling chuckle that stretched out until it curdled into silence again. I gripped the wheel tighter. "Rough night to be walking," I muttered. He nodded, lips parting to show more of those gleaming rows, but he didn't respond right away. His pause dragged on, heavy and uncomfortable, before he finally whispered, "Nights like this bring out the best in people." Then another chuckle, hollow and wrong, as though he was laughing at something only he could hear. The cadence of his voice scratched at me. He spoke like a man mimicking conversation he'd overheard once, but never understood. The words fit, but the rhythm was all wrong. Long pauses dropped in the middle of thoughts, laughter bubbling out at nothing, silence settling where answers should have been. I tried again, desperate to keep control of the night, to keep it ordinary. "Where are you from?" His eyes cut to me, gleaming faintly in the dashboard light. He tilted his head, too far, his neck popping faintly with the movement. "Everywhere," he said at last. Then he laughed again, harder this time, like the word itself was some kind of joke I wasn't in on. The sound made my skin crawl. It didn't stop when it should have. It kept going until I felt heat rising in my chest, until I wanted to scream at him to stop, until it broke off suddenly, replaced by silence so thick it felt like another person had entered the car. I stared at the road, refusing to meet his gaze again, but I could feel him watching me. The grin hadn't moved. The wet smell of him filled the air, metallic and sour, worming its way into my lungs. And then, low and amused, he spoke again. "You want to ask me about the bag?" My throat tightened. He leaned down, resting a pale hand on the satchel at his feet, fingertips brushing the rusted zipper with a lover's care. His laughter bubbled up once more, giddy, eager, carrying no trace of humanity at all. I didn't need him to open it yet. Every nerve in my body already knew that whatever waited inside didn't belong on this side of the road, or any side. The satchel sat slumped against his leg, darkened by rain, heavy enough that it thudded faintly when the car hit a bump. His pale fingers curled around the zipper, tapping it in a slow rhythm like a drummer counting down to something inevitable. The grin on his face never wavered, but his eyes glowed faintly in the dashboard light, locked on me as though my reaction was the only thing that mattered. "You want to see what's in the bag, don't you?" His voice came soft, playful, but threaded with something that felt older, hungrier. My throat worked, but no words came out. I focused on the yellow lines unfurling beneath my headlights, praying they'd guide me away from this nightmare. But his laugh rose again, bubbling and broken. He leaned closer, the sour metallic tang of his breath stinging my nose. "Don't lie, everyone wants to see." The sound of the zipper sliding open sliced through the cabin. It was too loud, too sharp, stretching far beyond what a simple rusted zip should sound like. It rose in pitch as though metal teeth were screaming against each other, until I flinched with the pain of it drilling into my skull. He dragged it slow, savoring the noise, his grin splitting wider. For a moment, I thought the zipper would never end. that the bag was somehow bottomless. When it finally stopped, the silence that followed was worse. The air felt thick, my lungs resisting each inhale, waiting for him to reveal what lay inside. He dipped his hand in, moving with deliberate patience. The satchel bulged oddly as though it resisted being opened, the shape inside shifting with a sick, wet sound. His eyes never left me, his grin never faltered. When he finally pulled something free, the dashboard light caught it. A tooth, perfectly clean, gleaming white, root and all. He rolled it between his fingers, caressing it like a prized stone. Then he reached in again. Another tooth, then another. He began laying them on his lap, one by one, humming under his breath in time with the thuds of enamel. Soon there was a small pile, glistening like pearls in the glow. "These," he whispered, voice trembling with delight, "are mine. Each one taken with care. Each one remembered." My stomach twisted. I gripped the wheel tighter, eyes locked on the road, terrified of what I might see if I looked too long at his hands. But the sound of teeth clicking together as he stacked them echoed in the car, impossible to ignore. He leaned closer, pressing a single one into my free hand, curling my fingers shut around it. His palm was ice against my skin. His grin widened until I thought his jaw might split. "Go ahead," he whispered. "Add it to the collection." And in my hand, slick with rain and sweat, the tooth pulsed faintly, as though it had a heartbeat of its own. The tooth throbbed faintly in my palm, as if it belonged to something still alive. I wanted to throw it away, hurl it out the window into the endless dark, but his hand hovered near mine, waiting, daring me. His grin gleamed too wide in the dim glow of the dash as he dragged the bag fully open. The stench hit me first. Not rot, not blood. Something older, drier, like dust swept from a crypt. He tilted the satchel toward me, and I couldn't stop myself from looking. Inside were rows upon rows of teeth. Not scattered, not dumped, arranged. Each one carefully cleaned, each root gleaming pale, each surface polished to a sickly shine. They sat in neat rows as though displayed in a jeweler's case, cushioned by strips of black fabric, and tucked alongside them, paper tags. I squinted, heart hammering as my eyes caught the words scribbled in a frantic hand. Dates, towns, each tooth cataloged, markers of where it had been taken, when it had been ripped, free. I saw one with a date from years ago, a town I recognized, a place I had driven through. Another older still from a city I knew only by name. They stretched back decades, maybe longer. Hundreds of teeth, maybe thousands. Each a souvenir, each a story. He reached inside with trembling reverence, plucking one up between his fingers. The tag dangled beneath it, ink running faint with age. He held it up to the dashboard light, his grin stretching wider with pride. "This one," he whispered, "came from a woman who begged me not to. She gave me her wedding ring too. I didn't keep it, but I kept this." He kissed the enamel, lips leaving a faint smear before setting it back into place. Another followed, held close to my face. This one belonged to a boy. He laughed right up until the end. Then he didn't. His chuckle rattled through the cabin, teeth flashing as he spoke. I clenched the wheel until my knuckles ached, bile rising in my throat. The road ahead blurred in the fog, but I couldn't tear my eyes away from the satchel. Every tooth seemed to glow faintly, catching the green dash light, as though their owners still lived inside them. He leaned closer, whispering, "Every town has a piece of me now. Every date a memory. And now you do too." He tapped my hand, closing my fist tighter around the tooth he had given me. I tried to speak, tried to demand he get out, that he take his collection and vanish into the night. But no words came, My tongue felt thick, my throat locked. The bag pulsed faintly, as though something inside it still breathed. The tags rustled, whispering together like dead leaves. He stroked the satchel with a lover's care, his grin splitting further, impossibly wide. Then he turned, eyes boring into me. "You'll need a tag for yours," he said, voice low and trembling with anticipation. And I realized the tooth in my hand already had one tied to it, with tonight's date and the name of the town I was driving through. The road ahead vanished into fog, my headlights swallowed whole, but I barely saw it anymore. My eyes kept darting to the satchel, open wide on the seat beside me, rows of teeth gleaming faintly in the dashboard light. I had not heard the zipper close. I had not seen him reach to fasten it. I had not even noticed him move. Because when I finally turned to the passenger seat, it was empty. The grin that had loomed inches from my face, the stench of his breath, the damp weight of him dripping on the floor mat. It was all gone. The door was still locked, the window still sealed. Yet he was nowhere to be found. Only the bag remained, gaping open, its contents displayed like an altar. I gripped the wheel tighter, sweat slicking my palms. "Where did you go?" The whisper slipped out before I could stop it, swallowed by the hum of the tires. The bag shifted then, just slightly, as if something inside had rolled or breathed or leaned toward me. The teeth clattered softly against one another, a dry, brittle chorus that prickled my skin. The tags tied to their roots rustled, brushing faintly in the still air, whispering the names of towns, of dates, of endings. I wanted to shove it onto the floor, to hurl it out the window, but I couldn't move my hand from the wheel. My other still clenched the tooth he had pressed into my palm. It was slick with sweat, but warm now. Too warm, almost pulsing. The radio, long dead, crackled without warning. Static filled the car, and under it came his voice. Low, grinning, patient. "You've already joined me. You're just waiting for your turn." The bag rattled harder. A few teeth rolled loose, clicking across the seat toward me. One stopped against my thigh, its tag dangling clear enough for me to read. Tonight's date, my town, my name. My vision blurred with panic, but I didn't dare let go of the wheel. The car surged forward, the fog thickening, mile markers vanishing into the dark. Every muscle in my body screamed to stop, to get out. But the bag pulsed with heat, the teeth shifting like they were grinding themselves down in anticipation. The static rose to a scream, and beneath it came laughter, his laughter, overlapping, endless, spilling from every tooth in the open satchel. The sound filled the car until it felt like the enamel itself was rattling against my bones. I blinked, desperate for air, and when I opened my eyes again, the bag was gone. Not zipped, not stowed. Vanished. The passenger seat sat empty, dry, spotless, as though he had never been there at all. But my hand was still closed around the tooth. And when I opened my palm, I saw my own handwriting etched into the tag. My name, my date, my town. The passenger seat is empty now. But he is not gone. He's waiting, smiling, in the dark just beyond the headlights. The road had gone on too long, my eyelids growing heavy with each passing mile. The sight of a rest stop sign was almost a relief, a promise of light and stillness. I turned off the highway, tires hissing on the wet pavement, headlights sweeping across the small lot. Only one other car sat there, tucked in the corner near the bathrooms. Its windows were fogged over, the engine silent, the whole vehicle sagging like it had been there far too long. I parked a few spaces away, keeping the engine idling unsure why my chest tightened at the sight of it. The fogged glass seemed to breathe, as though someone inside was exhaling slow, steady breaths against every pane. But no movement stirred within. No headlights flashed, no door cracked open. Just that suffocating mist sealed tight against the windows. I told myself it was nothing, just another traveler sleeping off exhaustion. But unease crawled through me all the same. I stepped out, the cold night air biting at my skin. The drizzle had thinned to mist, drifting low over the asphalt. The humming of the overhead lights was faint, faltering. The kind of sound that makes silence worse instead of better. The car sat still, droplets clinging to the paint, the fog thick inside the glass. I moved past it quickly, heading for the bathrooms, trying not to look too closely. But out of the corner of my eye, I swore the fog inside swirled, shifting against the windows as though stirred by unseen hands. The bathroom door groaned when I pulled it open, its metal hinges rusted, its frame warped by years of neglect. The light inside flickered, buzzing low, casting the tiled room in a harsh, stuttering glow. The smell of disinfectant was faint, long faded beneath something damp, moldy, almost sweet in its decay. I paused at the sinks, staring into the spotted mirror, trying to ground myself. My reflection looked pale, drawn, eyes shadowed with fatigue. But the lights flickered again, and for a moment I wasn't alone in the glass. Behind me stretched a smear of black, tall and angular, clinging to the corner where no shadow should have been. I spun around. Nothing. Only empty stalls, the rust-stained urinals, the hum of dying fluorescent bulbs. I tried to laugh it off, splashing water on my face. The sound echoed unnaturally, bouncing sharp against the tiles. When I looked up again, droplets slid down the mirror, though my hands hadn't touched the glass. And in the warped reflection, the shadow still lingered. Closer now, its shape stretched and wrong. My throat tightened, the air heavier. And from the stalls came a faint whisper, low, overlapping, as though more than one voice spoke at once. I froze, listening. The whisper carried no words I understood, but the rhythm was familiar, mimicking the sound of my own breath. The reflection flickered again, the black mass looming behind me. Too close now. My body screamed to move, but my legs locked in place. And then the bathroom lights went out. The darkness pressed in the moment the bulbs died, and for a breath I couldn't even hear my own pulse. Then, with a reluctant hum, the light sputtered back to life, weak and trembling. The room was no longer empty. The shadows had grown. They weren't falling right. They weren't the thin outlines cast by fixtures and sinks. They stretched wrong, taller than the stalls, bending upward, curling into the ceiling like black smoke frozen in place. One reached across the tiles, its long shape spilling under the gaps of every door at once, as though it was too vast to be contained by just one form. I staggered back, shoulder colliding with the cold porcelain of a sink. My eyes darted from stall to stall, heart slamming, throat dry. The shadows didn't move, but I could feel them watching, pressing, waiting. The light flickered again, and with every pulse they seemed to shift closer, bending at impossible angles. Hello? My voice cracked, thin and brittle. The echo came back wrong. Too many layers, too many voices, whispering over each other. The ceiling groaned above me. I looked up and froze. One of the shadows was climbing. It stretched past the flickering bulb, its limbs long and jointless, sliding upward with no sound at all. It bent its head, or what should have been a head, toward me, and though there were no features, I felt its gaze pierce straight through my chest. The stall doors rattled then, shaking in unison. Each lock clinked, metal scraping against rust, though no hands touched them. My breath hitched, every nerve screaming to run, but my legs felt rooted to the damp tiles. The whispering rose, overlapping voices slithering across the walls, too faint to understand, but too loud to ignore. They filled the spaces between the flickers of light, so that in every moment of darkness, I heard them breathing against my ear. The bulbs above flared bright, then dimmed to a sickly yellow. The shadows shifted again, stretching taller, curling outward like they were peeling themselves free of the surfaces that birthed them. One of them dragged long, spindly fingers across the tiles, leaving black smears that pulsed faintly as though alive. I forced myself toward the door, each step shaky, every instinct screaming that if I turned my back, I wouldn't make it out. The exit handle gleamed faint in the flickering glow, and I pushed hard, metal groaning under my grip. The door didn't budge. Behind me, the stalls rattled harder, every lock snapping back and forth. The air grew colder, sharp enough to sting in my lungs, and I knew if I looked back, I'd see them crawling free, their height swallowing the room. The lights died again, and in the pitch dark, something leaned close, whispering my name in a dozen voices at once. When they flared back on, the stalls were silent. But the shadows were no longer bound to them. They stretched across the floor, all of them reaching straight toward me. The air thickened until every breath scraped my throat raw, the silence stretching taut before it split open. A whisper slithered through it, faint but unmistakable. My name. Spoken with the precise cadence of my own voice, like it had been stolen and fed back to me. I froze, palms slick against the door handle. Then the sound grew. Not one voice, but dozens, layered and broken, each speaking my name at once. Some dragged it out long and low, others hissed it sharp and quick, all overlapping until it was a chorus. My knees buckled beneath the weight of it. The shadows pulsed in time with the whispers. They crawled across the floor, their long limbs stretching toward me, their fingers curling wrong, too many joints bending in places no bones should. My reflection flickered in the chrome of the sink, and I saw my lips moving though I hadn't spoken. The whispers were using my mouth, my breath, every syllable sliding back into me like possession. I pressed my forehead against the door, praying it would give. But the metal was ice cold, biting my skin. Behind me, the stall locks clattered again, sharp like teeth snapping. The whispers rose, louder now, all calling, my name in unison, a dozen of me pleading, mocking, commanding. I spun around, heart crashing in my ribs. The stalls hung open now, every door swinging wide. But they weren't empty. The shadows stretched up from inside them, taller than the ceiling should allow, their heads brushing against pipes, their bodies thin as smoke, their fingers drumming a rhythm against the metal walls. Each one swayed as though waiting to step forward. "Say it," one voice rasped from the swarm, a perfect mimic of my own. Another answered in chorus, deeper, rougher. "Say it." The sound rolled through the bathroom, endless echoes of my name fractured into jagged tones. It pressed into my skull, worming deep, until I felt myself mumbling it under my breath, forced to repeat it with them. The overhead light burst then, shattering glass across the floor, plunging the room into near darkness. The only illumination came from the faint green glow of the exit sign. In it, the shadows seemed thicker, their edges sharp, their shapes less abstract. Some looked like me. Twisted outlines of my form, stretched and elongated, lips wide with too many teeth gleaming where no face should have been. The chorus hushed all at once. The silence was worse than the noise, heavy and expectant. Then, in that awful stillness, one voice broke free, low and steady, speaking my name one final time. Only this time, it didn't come from behind me. It came from the door I leaned against. A whisper pressed against the metal, as if something waited on the other side of it, lips brushing the same surface I clung to. The handle shifted under my grip, turning with a hand that wasn't mine. The handle slipped loose from my grip, twitching as though something unseen twisted from the other side. I staggered back, chest heaving, the whispers falling into a low murmur that pressed against my eardrums. The shadows thickened in the green glow of the exit sign, no longer confined to corners or stalls. They began to peel themselves from the walls, their forms stretching long and wrong, their fingers unspooling into thin, jointless strands that dragged across the tiles with a sound like wet cloth tearing. They crawled, slow at first, their limbs bending at impossible angles, their bodies dragging across the floor as if gravity couldn't decide what to do with them. Each movement scraped across my nerves, silent yet deafening. A rhythm of approach that set every muscle in my body trembling. The walls seemed to sigh with relief as the shadows tore free, leaving black stains behind. Stains that pulsed faintly as if still alive. One reached toward me, its fingers brushing across the sink, leaving smears that hissed against the porcelain. I backed further into the corner, unable to breathe, unable to think of anything but the fact that they were no longer bound by reflection or angle. They were here now, unchained, crawling into the same air I breathed. The whispers swelled again, each shadow humming with my own voice, each syllable stretched and layered until it no longer sounded human. You stopped. You came inside. You don't leave. The words rolled together like a chant, overlapping, drilling deep into my bones. The nearest one dragged itself closer, its fingers stretching until they nearly spanned the width of the floor. They curled upward, beckoning, trembling with hunger. Its body rose taller, scraping the ceiling tiles as it loomed, faceless yet somehow watching me with unbearable focus. Another peeled itself off the mirror, its form flattening, then swelling outward as if it had always been pressed between the glass and the air, waiting for release. Its hands split into more hands, each one reaching, brushing against the floor and walls as it crawled toward me. The bathroom felt smaller, shrinking with every inch they gained. The air thickened with the stench of mildew and wet stone, my throat closing as I fought to breathe. The exit sign flickered, threatening to plunge everything into blackness, and with each pulse the shadows seemed to skip closer, as though the dark let them move in ways I couldn't follow. One hand brushed my ankle, cold as ice water, weightless but undeniable. I kicked back, stumbling, but the touch lingered, the cold seeping into my skin. The chant rose louder, a dozen voices hissing my name now, stretching it until it no longer felt like mine. The exit door shuddered once, metal bending outward, as though something far larger pressed from the other side. The shadows swarmed closer, jointless fingers curling around the sink, the stalls, the very air, all of them reaching for me at once. And in the dim light, I realized there was no space left to run. The exit sign flickered until it glowed steady red, and in that thin wash of light, I threw myself at the door. My palm slammed against the metal, my shoulder bruising as I shoved hard. This time, it gave way. Cold air burst against me, thick with mist, and I stumbled out into the night. For a moment, I thought I was free. The whispers cut off, the shadows held behind, sealed inside the bathroom's flickering glow. My chest heaved, lungs raw, but I ran anyway, feet pounding against the damp pavement, heart tearing itself to pieces in my ribs. I fixed my eyes on where I had parked, desperate for the familiar shape of my car, for anything normal, anything safe. But it wasn't there. The space where I had left it sat empty, the asphalt slick and bare. And in its place, just a few yards away, stood the same car I had seen when I first pulled in. The one with the fogged-up windows, the one that had sagged like it had been waiting too long. Only now, its driver's side door hung open. The mist curled inside it, spilling out in lazy tendrils, wrapping around the frame like fingers beckoning me closer. The interior light glowed faintly, sickly yellow, illuminating nothing but shadow within. My legs faltered, but some pull, heavy and relentless, urged me forward. It was the same pull that had made me stop here, the same pull that had dragged me into that bathroom. Behind me, the bathroom door creaked, and I didn't dare look back. The sound of the shadows peeling themselves free echoed faintly, wet and endless. And I knew if I turned, I wouldn't move again. The fogged car waited. My breath plumed in the mist as I edged closer, eyes locked on that open door. The glass still steamed, as though breath inside pressed against it, though no one sat visible within. Drops of condensation slid down the panes in slow, deliberate trails, like hands dragging claws across the glass from the inside. The whispers returned, soft now, leaking from the open door. They carried my name, layered and fractured, the same chorus I had heard in the stalls. My pulse skipped as the sound grew clearer, and I realized the voices weren't calling me from the car. They were calling me into it. I stopped at the edge of the open door, peering inside. The interior was impossibly dark, deeper than shadow, swallowing even the weak glow of the dome light. I could see only the faint shimmer of something wet on the seats. Rows of faint handprints lined the fogged glass from the inside, smeared across every window, each print longer, thinner, more warped than the last. The whispers swelled, pressing against my skull until my ears rang. I staggered back, but the pavement seemed to tilt beneath me, the lot stretching longer, darker, as though there was nowhere else to go but forward. And then I saw it. In the driver's seat, faint through the fogged glass, a shape leaned close. Its mouth opened, stretching wide, revealing teeth too white, too many. The door waited, open and patient. And behind me, the bathroom door slammed shut. The night was quiet in that uneasy way highways sometimes are, when even the insects fall silent and the only sound is the low hum of your own tires on endless asphalt. Mist gathered in the ditches, spilling across the lanes in long white ribbons. I leaned forward over the wheel, headlights slicing through the dark. That's when I saw her. She drifted across the shoulder first, almost weightless, a pale shape moving with a slowness that made my pulse spike. Her gown billowed and trailed as though she were submerged, the fabric pulling behind her in impossible waves, though there was no wind. Her bare feet touched the road, but made no sound, no mark, no impression. For a moment, I thought she was smoke, or a trick of the mist. But as my lights hit her fully, I saw her face, too pale, too sharp. Her eyes caught the beams, reflecting like an animal's, hollow and silver. Her hair clung damp to her face, long and stringy, shifting with the same underwater slowness as her gown. She turned her head slightly, not in surprise, not in fear, but with the sluggish inevitability of someone who already knew I was there. I gripped the wheel until my hands ached. Instinct said to swerve, to speed past, to put distance between myself and the thing gliding into my lane. But I couldn't. My foot pressed lightly against the brake as though someone else's will guided me, slowing me down, pulling me toward her. She raised one arm, pale and weightless, fingers long and limp as if her bones had been washed away. Her hand did not wave, did not beckon. It simply lifted into the beam of my lights, and her shadow stretched impossibly long across the road. The closer I came, the colder the air grew. The mist on the asphalt thickened, swirling around her like a veil, and the air inside my car fogged faintly despite the vents blowing warm. My breath came shallow, every part of me trembling with the sense that I had crossed into a place I wasn't supposed to see. Her lips parted. Even over the hum of the tires, even through the sealed windows, I swore I heard her whisper. A sound like water spilling over stone. A wordless murmur, faint and steady, pulling me deeper into the road ahead. When I finally passed her, I couldn't bring myself to look directly, couldn't risk catching her eyes again. But in the edge of my vision, I saw her head turn slowly, following me, her face tilting as if memorizing mine. I pressed harder on the gas, desperate for distance. But the rearview mirror betrayed me. In its glass, her pale figure stood still at the edge of the asphalt, gown rippling in currents of air that didn't exist. Then, with one slow step, she began to drift forward again. And no matter how far the mile markers stretched, she never grew smaller in the mirror. The road curved gently, a ribbon of wet black cutting through the mist. And she was there again. Not behind me in the mirror this time, but standing squarely in the middle of the lane ahead. Her pale form seemed to glow faintly in the beam of my headlights, a human silhouette rendered in chalk and moonlight. Panic seized me. My foot slammed the brake pedal, tires screeching against the slick asphalt, the wheel trembling beneath my grip. The horn blared, a sharp, angry wail that shattered the silence of the night. She did not flinch. The pale woman stood still, her gown drifting around her as though caught in unseen currents. Her face was expressionless, eyes locked on me with the steadiness of a predator studying something already caught. The horn's cry echoed off the fog, warping into something hollow. But she never blinked, never stepped aside, never acknowledged the sound at all. My chest heaved. The car rattled as it slowed to a crawl, headlights burning against her unmoving body. Every nerve screamed that I was seconds away from impact, but some part of me knew I could not hit her. The world itself would not allow it. I leaned on the horn harder, shouting into the windshield now, desperate for any reaction. My voice cracked, the sound bouncing back against me in the confined cabin, swallowed by the roar of my own fear. She only tilted her head. The movement was slow, deliberate, unsettlingly childlike, as if she was studying me from a new angle. Her hair clung to her face in damp strings, her mouth parted slightly as though she were about to speak. But no words came. I let the horn die, its echo lingering in the mist. The silence that followed was heavier, pressing against my ribs, choking me. The headlights flickered once, their beams dimming, shadows stretching unnaturally long across the wet asphalt. Her figure absorbed the light rather than reflected it, her edges blurring into the night like she had never been entirely there. The car shuddered as if something unseen pressed against it, rocking faintly on its suspension. My hands locked around the wheel. The woman still had not moved, yet I felt her closing in, as though the space between us was shrinking despite the distance holding. Her lips finally stirred. I couldn't hear words, not clearly, but the sound crawled through the air. A murmur layered over itself 1,000 times, like water rushing beneath frozen stone. I leaned forward without meaning to, straining to understand, and for a moment the illusion broke. Her gown writhed like a living thing, folding and unfolding in waves, as if something beneath it breathed. The tires shifted against the asphalt, the car creeping forward of its own accord. My foot pressed the brake harder, but it no longer mattered. She was watching me. Only me. And when the lights flickered again, her figure blurred into two, then three, then more. Each pale shape standing across the road, each set of eyes fixed on mine. The horn died in my throat. There was no sound left but her silence. The beams of my headlights faltered, stuttering in the mist like a failing heartbeat. For an instant the road disappeared, swallowed in darkness, and when the light flared again, she was closer. Too close. Her gown brushed the hood, her pale hands at her sides, her head bowed so her face was hidden beneath a curtain of stringy hair. I gripped the wheel, sweat slicking my palms, eyes burning from refusing to blink. The bulb sputtered again, the beams dimming to a weak glow that barely reached her chest. The mist pressed thick around us, and in that flicker of half-light, she lifted her head. I saw her face. The beauty of her pale skin had peeled away in strips, mottled and sagging like old parchment. Her eyes were gone, sockets gaping, dark and bottomless, leaking thin trails of rot that gleamed wet in the failing light. Her mouth was sewn shut with blackened thread, the stitches pulling her lips into a cruel, distorted line. The seams strained as though something inside still fought to get out, pressing against the flesh, twitching with every shallow rise of her chest. The lights blinked out completely, plunging me into black. I screamed without sound, fumbling at the wheel, the brake, anything to anchor myself. When the beams cut back on, she was gone. My chest heaved, every nerve raw. The mist swirled, us in empty space ahead, and for a second, I believed she had vanished entirely, that I had imagined her face, her presence, her wrongness. Relief came sharp, fragile, almost dizzying. Then the lights faltered again. She was standing beside the car now, her face pressed to the driver's side window, so close her rotten skin smeared faintly against the glass. Her eyeless sockets poured darkness into the cabin, swallowing every ounce of air I thought I had left. The stitches in her mouth quivered with strain, jerking as though the threads themselves were about to snap. I jerked the wheel, swerving blindly down the lane, the horn blaring again in my panic. Her face vanished, the window clear once more, but the sensation of her presence clung heavy in the car. My reflection in the rearview mirror looked pale and wrong, my eyes shadowed, my mouth stretched too tight. The lights flickered again, and she appeared in the road ahead, then vanished, then beside me, then behind, each flash of darkness placing her closer, closer, closer. Her gown dragged across the asphalt with a sound like water rushing through stone tunnels, echoing inside the cabin, though I knew the windows were sealed. My foot pressed to the floor, but the engine whined uselessly, the car crawling as though dragged through mud. The headlights sputtered a final time, gasping like a dying breath. And in the last flare of light, her face hovered inches from mine. Eyeless, rotted, the stitches straining wide enough that I saw the faintest glimmer of teeth pressing from behind. Then darkness swallowed everything. And in that suffocating void, I heard the first stitch snap. The darkness swallowed me whole, a void so absolute I couldn't tell if my eyes were open. My breaths came ragged and shallow, each one louder than the silence pressing in from every direction. Then, with a faint electric sigh, the headlights flared back to life. The road stretched empty. The mist had thinned, leaving only the sheen of wet asphalt ahead. She was gone. My knuckles ached from how tightly I gripped the wheel. For a moment I thought maybe it was over, that the pale woman had slipped back into whatever nightmare she'd drifted from. I forced myself to exhale, though the sound came out broken, trembling, like a lie I couldn't quite sell. Then I saw them. Handprints. They smeared across the inside of my windshield. Hundreds of them, layered over each other until no glass remained clear. They were muddy, wet, streaked in long, dripping lines that glistened under the faint glow of the dash. Some prints were small, like a child's. Others were larger, palms wide, fingers long and misshapen. They covered everything: side windows, rearview mirror, even the dome light above. Each one pressed from the inside. My heart hammered, and I let go of the wheel just long enough to touch the nearest print. My fingertips met damp grit, mud thick against the glass. The smell hit then, earthy, rotting like soil dug from a flooded grave. The handprints began to drip. Long streaks ran down the glass as though the hands were still pressed there, still fresh, still moving. My breath fogged the space between them, but I could feel the heat of something else. The faint pressure of palms pressing back. The rearview mirror shifted, tilted without me touching it. My own reflection had vanished, swallowed in brown streaks. And beneath the grime, faintly visible in the dim light, another face began to form. Pale, rotted, eyeless. Her sewn mouth quivered behind the streaks as if she pressed her face against the same glass, waiting for me to notice. I wrenched my eyes away, staring at the road, forcing the car faster. The engine roared, but the handprints multiplied. Each mile added more. Fresh mud smearing across the inside of the windshield until the road blurred. My chest clenched with terror. I could no longer see where I was driving, only the vague blur of yellow lines beneath the filth. A sound rose then, not the engine, not the tires. Fingernails, scraping inside the roof, dragging inside the doors, clawing at the sealed air. 100 hands working at once, eager, patient, determined. I slammed my fist against the glass, shouting, screaming, desperate to break through. The mud smeared, but the handprints didn't fade. They thickened, pressing harder until I swore I saw the glass bulge inward. Then, from the mess of prints ahead, one hand dragged slow across the windshield. The fingers were long, boneless, bending wrong as they traced a single word into the streaking mud. Mine. The car shook beneath me, the engine whining as I pressed the gas harder, trying to outrun the stench of mud and rot seeping from the glass. My vision blurred. Nothing but smeared handprints and streaking filth across the windshield. But I couldn't stop. I couldn't breathe if I stopped. The road, the world, all of it had narrowed to the blur of yellow lines dragging me forward. Then, the radio crackled. I hadn't touched it. The knob hadn't turned. But the speakers hissed alive with static, loud enough to drown out the roar of the engine. It filled the cabin, sharp and electric, a sound that clawed into my skull until I thought it would split me in two. I slapped at the dial, twisting it, but the static only swelled, shifting into a low hum, a rhythm that matched the pulse hammering in my chest. And through it, faint at first, a voice began to form. Drive slower. Every muscle in my body went rigid. The voice was soft, dragged thin by static, but it was unmistakable. Hers. The woman in white. The one I had seen drifting across the asphalt. The one whose eyeless sockets had pressed against my window. Her voice seeped into me, cold and wet, like water slipping into cracks. Drive slower. She repeated, firmer this time, the hiss of the radio rising with each word. The car shuddered, the wheel trembling under my hands, as though something else had latched onto it. My foot pressed the gas harder, desperate to resist. But the engine coughed, choking, slowing against my will. The handprints thickened on the windshield, spreading across every inch of glass until the road was gone. The mud dripped in long brown streaks, each one pulsing faintly with a heartbeat that wasn't mine. Then her voice came again, closer now, as if she were leaning directly beside me. "I am still in the car." The words sank into me, cold as ice water poured straight down my spine. I jerked my head, scanning the cabin, the seat beside me, the rear-view mirror. The passenger seat sat empty, the back seat a shadow. But the smell was stronger now. Damp earth and rotted fabric, filling the air vents, filling my lungs. "I am still in the car," she whispered again. And this time the voice wasn't through the radio. It was behind me. The static roared, shrieking through the speakers, drowning everything else. But I swore I heard the faint creak of fabric, the slow drag of something heavy shifting across the back seat. The mirror tilted again, angling down of its own accord. My reflection vanished, replaced by the faint curve of white fabric pooling across the seat behind me. The wheel locked in my hands, dragging me toward the shoulder, the car slowing despite the pressure of my foot. The radio hissed louder, voices layering inside the static now, all repeating the same words, her words, until they filled the car in a chorus. "Drive slower, drive slower, drive slower." And when the lights flickered out for the final time, I felt a cold hand settle against the back of my neck. The highway had stretched endless mile markers ticking by like teeth in the dark. My eyes burned from staring too long into the empty black ahead, the yellow lines blurring together. I told myself I wouldn't stop, not until dawn, not until the towns returned and the world felt human again. But the glint caught me. It lay at the edge of the shoulder, just past the sweep of my headlights, a small flash against the wet gravel. My foot lifted from the gas before I even thought about it, tires hissing as I slowed to a crawl. Curiosity is a cruel master. I pulled over, engine idling, and stepped into the chill night air. The object lay half buried in mud, the brass dulled but unmistakable. A motel key. Not a card, not something modern, but a heavy old-fashioned key with a long plastic fob dangling from its ring. I plucked it up, wiping dirt from its surface. The numbers gleamed faintly in the dim light. Room 13. The engraving looked worn, as though it had passed through countless hands, but the brass teeth were sharp, freshly cut. I turned it over in my palm, heart thudding. There was no motel nearby, not for miles. I had passed nothing but empty fields and shuttered rest stops since dusk. And yet, holding it, I felt the weight of inevitability, as though the key was meant to be found, meant to be carried, meant to lead me, somewhere I had no business going. The fob was damp, cold, almost clammy. I swore I smelled something on it. Old smoke, mildew, the faintest trace of rot. I glanced around, scanning the fields. Nothing moved. No lights, no distant glow of a sign promising vacancy. Just endless black pressing against the sky. I shoved the key into my pocket, telling myself it was nothing, just trash dropped on the road, some relic tossed by a stranger. But the engine faltered as I climbed back in. The dashboard flickered, the headlights dimmed. I twisted the ignition with shaking fingers, but the car shuddered, protesting, before rolling forward reluctantly. That's when I saw it. Half a mile down the road, beyond the fog, a neon sign flickered to life. Red letters spelling motel, buzzing faintly in the night air. It hadn't been there before. I knew it. The last time I'd passed this stretch, the lot had been empty, cracked, forgotten. But now the sign burned weakly, casting a glow across a sagging building at the edge of the highway. The lot was deserted, every window dark. But the shape of the building was unmistakable. Low, peeling paint, a line of identical doors, each with a number. My car rolled into the gravel lot without me willing it. The key in my pocket grew heavier with each passing second. And when I finally stopped, headlights cutting across the row of doors, I saw one painted faintly brighter than the rest. Room 13. The brass key pressed hot against my leg, as though urging me to try it. The rain came sudden and heavy, drumming against the roof of the car like 1,000 fists. My wipers screeched uselessly across the glass, barely carving lines through the torrent. The highway blurred, yellow lines dissolving beneath waves of water. I hadn't seen another car in hours. My bones ached with exhaustion, and when the neon glow cut through the storm, I almost wept with relief. A motel sign buzzed weakly ahead, its light fractured in the rain. Half the letters were dead, leaving only a broken word glowing red in the downpour. I slowed, tires spitting gravel as I pulled into the lot. The building slouched in the storm, paint peeling, windows dark. Only the office glowed faintly, a single bulb flickering behind dusty blinds. I killed the engine and sat for a moment, listening to the hiss of rain against the windshield. My fingers brushed my pocket. The motel key was still there, its brass teeth sharp, the number etched into the plastic fob pressing against my thigh. 13. Something in me twisted when I looked at the row of doors. I counted them in the wash of the headlights. 12, 13, 14. Each door sagged, wood warped with age, numbers nailed crooked above their frames. And there it was, room 13. My breath caught. The brass fob in my pocket seemed to grow heavier, pulling at the fabric of my jeans, urging me forward. The storm roared around me, lightning splitting the horizon. But the door stood out sharp and undeniable, its paint faintly brighter than the others, as if freshly touched by unseen hands. I forced myself out into the rain, the cold soaking me instantly. The gravel shifted under my shoes as I crossed the lot, water pooling in the cracks. My pulse pounded in my ears, louder than the storm itself. I glanced back once. The office lights still burned, but no silhouette moved inside. No one waited to hand me a key, no one at all. The brass key slid into my palm, warm now, like it had been waiting for this moment. I stared at the number etched deep into the fob, water running down my wrist, dripping from my clenched fist. 13. I reached the door, its paint flaking beneath my touch. The number above was nailed slightly crooked, the shadow of older numbers faint beneath it, as though the door had been replaced more than once. My hand trembled as I raised the key, the brass glinting faintly in the neon light. The lock seemed too smooth, the key sliding in without resistance, as though it had always belonged there. The sound of the tumblers clicking open was drowned in the storm, but I felt it deep in my chest, a shifting, a permission granted. The knob turned easily, and when the door swung inward, I saw the glow of a lamp already burning inside, soft and warm, spilling across a room that should not have been waiting for me. The bedspread was turned down, and on the nightstand sat another key. The same brass, the same weight, its fob engraved with the number 14. The door creaked as it swung wider, the hinges crying out like they hadn't been moved in years. Warm light spilled across the carpet, but the glow did nothing to soften what hit me the moment I stepped inside. The stench. It was thick, clinging, sweet and foul at once. The unmistakable rot of something long dead. It rolled over me in waves, catching in the back of my throat, forcing bile to rise. I clamped a hand over my nose, but it didn't help. The smell wasn't just in the air. It was in the walls, in the carpet, in the very wood of the room. I forced my feet forward, the floorboards groaning under my weight. The lamp on the nightstand buzzed faintly, its shade tilted, its light too steady, as though someone had placed it there just moments before I arrived. The bedspread was pulled down neatly, the pillow indented faintly, like someone had only just risen from it. And there, lying squarely in the middle of the sheets, was a wallet. My wallet. For a long moment, I couldn't breathe. I stumbled closer, reaching with a hand that trembled violently. The leather was worn, soft from years of use. The same scratch across its front where I'd dropped it on gravel once. My initials pressed faintly on the inside flap, just as they should be. But I hadn't lost it. It had been in my pocket when I left. It was still in my pocket now. I reached down with shaking fingers, pulling the second one free, and held them side by side. Identical. Every scuff, every crease, every detail. Two copies of the same thing, staring back at me like a cruel joke. My breath hitched. Slowly, I opened the one on the bed. The cards were inside. My ID bent faintly in the corner. Receipts I knew by memory, the faded photograph tucked in the cash pocket. All mine. All exactly as they should be. A cold prickle crept across my scalp. If this was mine, then what was I carrying? I glanced down at the wallet in my hand. It felt heavier now, fuller, the leather damp to the touch. I pulled it open with a dread I couldn't resist. Inside were the same items, but ruined. My ID cracked down the middle, receipts bloated and stained, the photograph warped and smeared as though left too long in water. And behind the cards, something darker stuffed into the fold. I tugged it free with numb fingers. A motel key, brass, identical to the first. But the fob this time bore a different number. 15. The lamp flickered, buzzing sharply. The stench thickened, as if the walls themselves exhaled. My gaze shot back to the bed, to the wallet I had left lying open. It was gone. Only the impression of its weight lingered on the sheet. From the nightstand came a faint metallic clink. The second key, the one marked 14, had slid off the table on its own. It lay on the carpet now, pointing toward the door, and the knob was turning, slow and deliberate, from the other side. The knob stilled, leaving only the faint hum of the lamp to mark the silence. My chest burned from holding my breath, my whole body waiting for the door to swing inward. But it didn't. The room just sat there, stale and rotting, as though it had been waiting for me all along. My hand shook as I lifted the ruined wallet again, the one that had felt heavier than it should. The damp leather peeled against my skin, and I forced it open, shuffling through the warped contents. Cards stuck together, receipts bled ink. The photograph, slid loose from the fold. It was me. Not as I was standing now, but as I had never wanted to see myself. Asleep. Stretched across the very same bed I stood beside, my face softened in rest, my chest rising faintly with breath. The frame of the lamp glowed behind me in the picture, tilted the same way, buzzing faintly as though mocking me. Every detail matched: the torn bedspread, the warped carpet, the key on the nightstand. Except I had only just arrived. The breath I didn't know I was holding escaped in a choked rasp. My knees buckled and I dropped the photo to the sheets, though the image clung in my mind like a brand. I spun, scanning the corners of the room, the shadows against the walls. Someone had been here. Someone had stood over me, camera in hand, waiting until I was helpless enough to be captured. But how? The lamp's bulb flickered, casting the photograph in brief, strobing light as it slid from the bed onto the floor. My hand twitched toward it, but I couldn't bring myself to touch it again. The wallet sagged open in my grip, revealing something else pressed deep in the fold. Another picture. I dragged it free, fingers trembling, and the breath caught sharp in my throat. It was me again, still in this room, but no longer sleeping. Sitting upright, eyes wide, staring directly at the camera. At whoever had been standing there, snapping the shot. The photograph was bent, the edges curled as though handled too many times. My own face stared back, with an expression I recognized all too well. Terror. The same terror I felt now. The sound of metal clinking drew my gaze down. The brass key marked 15 had slid from my pocket, landing neatly atop the photo on the floor. It lay across my printed face, the number etched deep into its fob. The doorknob twitched again. A faint rattle, more insistent this time. Something pressed against the wood from outside, enough to bow the surface inward. The lamp flared once, humming loud enough to rattle the shade. The photo on the floor shifted under the key, as though a breath of air had passed over it. My printed eyes stared upward, wide and desperate, toward the ceiling. I tilted my head before I could stop myself, following the gaze. And there, in the warped plaster above, a fresh hole had been drilled. Just large enough for a lens. Just large enough to watch. The hole in the ceiling stared back at me, black and empty. But I felt the weight of an unseen eye pressed against it. My breath rattled in my chest, shallow and broken. And still the doorknob twitched with slow insistence. I stumbled backward, the ruined wallet slipping from my grip, photographs spilling across the carpet. My own face stared up at me from every angle, sleeping, waking, terrified. Each image warped like they'd been handled too often. I didn't wait for the door to open. I bolted. The hallway outside stretched long and stale, the carpet damp under my shoes, the wallpaper peeling in long strips that revealed rot beneath. My footsteps echoed louder than they should have, as though I weren't the only one running. Doors blurred past me, 12, 11, 10. Each one closed, each one humming faintly, as though something pressed against the wood from inside. I reached the office, chest heaving, the neon sign outside buzzing through the cracked blinds. A man sat behind the desk, pale under the flicker of fluorescent light, his newspaper spread flat before him. He didn't look up when I burst in, dripping rain and panic across the floor. "I need to check out," I rasped, slamming the brass key onto the counter. My hand trembled as it left me, but the fob clattered against the wood with a sound that felt final. "Room 13. Just check me out." At last he looked up. His eyes were watery, unfocused, as though they had grown tired of seeing too much. His lips parted slowly, words dragging out with the weight of habit. "That room hasn't been rented in 20 years. The air in the office seemed to die at once. The neon sign outside buzzed low, steady like a pulse. I stared down at the key, still lying between us, its brass gleaming faintly under the flicker of light. The number carved deep into the fob stared back like an accusation. "That's not possible," I whispered. My voice cracked under the weight of it. I was just there, my things, my wallet. His gaze slid past me, toward the row of doors across the lot, and for the briefest second, something like pity passed through his expression. He folded the newspaper, his hand slow and deliberate, and said nothing more. When I turned, the parking lot was empty. The building sagged in shadow, its windows boarded, its paint stripped by years of weather. The neon sign was dead now, the pole rusted, its letters broken. The only glow came from my headlights, still burning faintly across the gravel. But clutched in my palm, heavier than stone, the brass key still lingered, its number etched deep. its weight impossible to deny. I staggered to my car, threw myself inside, and locked the doors. The rain had stopped, but the smell of rot clung to my clothes, my skin, the air itself. I jammed the key into the glove box, slamming it shut, desperate to bury it. But when I looked up, my reflection in the rearview mirror wasn't alone. In the back seat, pale and still, I saw myself, sleeping, exactly as I had been in the photograph. The fuel light had been burning low for miles, a dull orange glow that seemed brighter than the headlights on that endless stretch of highway. When the gas station appeared beyond the curve, its flickering sign half swallowed by fog, I felt something almost like relief. The place leaned tired against the night. 2 pumps beneath a canopy, a dusty little shop behind cracked glass. I pulled in slow, gravel crunching under my tires. The air smelled faintly of rust and old oil, thick enough to sting my throat. The pumps stood like sentinels, paint peeling, numbers worn to ghostly smears. One bulb above me buzzed with the high whine of something ready to die. The door to the shop creaked open. A man stepped out, wiping his hands on a rag that left darker streaks instead of cleaning them. He was tall, thin, his shirt once white but long since yellowed. And he was smiling. Wide. Fixed. A grin stretched too long, too deliberate. But his eyes never changed. They stayed flat gray and hollow, as if the smile had nothing to do with him. His gaze slid over me, not quite meeting mine, not quite looking anywhere else. I froze with my hand on the gas cap, feeling like I had stumbled into a performance that was not meant for me. "Evening," he said, voice low and dry, like gravel poured down a metal chute. I nodded, forcing a muttered greeting, fumbling for my card. His grin stayed wide, but something about his jaw twitched, like he was holding it in place. I slid the nozzle free, the pump groaning like it hadn't been used in years. The meter spun reluctantly, numbers dragging slow across its face. The man didn't move. He just stood by the door, rag dangling from his hand, grin still plastered wide across his face. My skin crawled with every second of his stillness. I told myself not to stare, not to invite anything more than I had already taken. But when I glanced up, his smile had grown wider. The edges of his lips cracked faintly, skin straining as though it had never stretched that far before. His teeth gleamed too sharp in the buzzing light, his jaw trembling to hold them all in. His eyes, though, God, his eyes, remained dead and flat, never shifting, never blinking. The pump clicked off. I exhaled with relief I didn't realize I'd been holding. But when I turned to place the nozzle back, the meter was blank. No numbers, no total, just an empty black window staring back at me. I spun, heart leaping into my throat. The man was gone. The rag lay on the ground where he had stood, soaked dark in the rain that hadn't fallen. The shop behind him was dark now, every bulb dead, every pane of glass black. And in the reflection of my driver's side window, the smile still hovered just above my shoulder, wide, gleaming, and waiting. The glass door groaned as I pushed it open, the kind of sound that set teeth on edge, a high whine followed by a hollow click. A bell above the frame jangled faintly, but the tone was wrong, warped, like it had been slowed down or bent out of tune. Warm air spilled over me, thick with the stale smell of dust and something faintly metallic. The shop looked alive in a way the outside hadn't. Fluorescent lights buzzed overhead, though a few flickered like dying fireflies. Rows of shelves stretched long and narrow, their metal frames crooked, but every one of them was stocked. Full. Too full. At first, it was almost a relief. Bright colors, familiar shapes, packaging stacked in neat rows. But the longer I stared, the more I realized nothing was quite right. The cans bore logos I thought I knew, but the letters had shifted, the words slightly off. A red label shouted cola instead of cola. Potato chips read Prongles in jagged font. The mascot's smile sharp, too eager. Boxes of cereal showed wide-eyed cartoon animals, but their faces bent wrong, their pupils too large, their teeth faintly visible where none should be. I moved slowly down the aisle, the floor sticky under my shoes. Bags of candy shimmered bright, but their names twisted on my tongue as I tried to read them. Snickers, M&M's, candy corn. Each one familiar enough to draw me closer, yet foreign enough to churn my stomach. The refrigerator at the back hummed with steady vibration. Inside, rows of milk jugs stood side by side, identical, their labels bleached white except for the word drink. Just that one word, nothing else. The liquid inside sloshed faintly, too thin to be milk, too dark at the edges when the light hit. Something rustled behind me, a faint shuffle, like a foot dragged across linoleum. My chest tightened, but when I spun, the aisle stood empty. The bell above the door was still, the glass reflecting only my own pale face. I gripped a box from the shelf, something that should have been crackers. The cardboard sagged in my hand, damp, heavier than it should be. My stomach turned when I realized it pulsed faintly, the surface rising and falling as if it were breathing. I dropped it instantly. The box landed with a wet slap, not the sound of cardboard at all. Liquid seeped from the seams, spreading across the sticky floor. The lights overhead flickered harder, buzzing sharp, and every box, every can, every bag seemed to shift in unison, as though all of them were breathing, waiting, watching. The shuffle came again, louder this time. From the far end of the aisle, between the stacked shelves, I saw movement. A shadow stretched tall against the flickering light, too thin, too long, its head brushing the buzzing bulb. I froze. My hands itched to reach for the door, but I couldn't look away. The shadow leaned forward, its grin gleaming in the glow of warped packaging. And then, from all around me, the shelves began to whisper my name. The whispers of my name clung to the shelves even as I backed away, my shoes sticking to the damp floor. Every package seemed to tremble faintly, their colors bleeding in the stuttering light, mascots smiling too wide, as if they knew something I didn't. I forced myself toward the front counter, my breath ragged, throat raw with the sour air. And then I saw him. The attendant stood behind the register as though he had always been there. His rag still dangled from one hand, but it was clean now, too clean, as though it had never been touched at all. His grin stretched the same, lips pulled taut and trembling at the corners. But it was his voice that froze me. "Where do you think you are going?" The words fell out too precise, clipped, each syllable measured and deliberate like lines recited from a script. He didn't ask. He performed. His gray eyes didn't blink, didn't shift, didn't look at me. They locked somewhere just beyond me, as though he was speaking to the space I occupied, not the person inside it. I swallowed hard, my throat dry. Just leaving. The grin twitched wider, skin straining against the bones of his face. "Leaving," he repeated, exactly as I had said it, in my tone, my cadence. His voice cracked in the same way mine had cracked. The words echoed back to me, but they weren't mine anymore. They belonged to him. The lights above buzzed louder, the shelves groaning like the building itself was listening. I stepped back, bumping into a rack of magazines. The covers stared up at me, photographs of faces I almost recognized, people who looked like neighbors or co-workers, but subtly wrong. eyes too far apart, smiles bent sharp. Headlines ran in broken phrases, words scrambled until they meant nothing. I turned back to the counter, and he was closer now. Not behind it, but in front. The space between us swallowed in the blink of an eye. His rag dangled still, though his hand never moved. His teeth gleamed sharp, too white, stretching through the rictus grin. "Where do you think you are going?" he asked again, syllables identical, every pause deliberate. A puppet's speaking lines drilled into its skull. His voice shook the shelves this time, cans rattling, boxes shivering, as if the whole station waited for my answer. My breath caught, my chest heaving. I stumbled toward the door, my palms slamming against the glass. The bell jangled overhead, warped and hollow, but the door didn't move. It was locked, bolted from nowhere. I turned, heart pounding in my throat. The attendant stood just inches away, his head cocked too far to one side, neck bones straining against skin. His eyes finally moved, sliding down until they locked on mine. "You won't make it," he whispered, breaking his perfect rhythm at last. The words were cracked now, breathless, trembling with hunger. Then the smile collapsed, and his jaw split wider, wider, unhinging in silence, until the grin was nothing but a black chasm swallowing his face. And in that dark, I heard my own voice answering him, rehearsed, precise, inevitable. The bell above the warped glass door let out a strangled jangle as I shoved through it, lungs clawing for the cold night air. My shoes splashed against the gravel lot, the rain gone, the mist thick and low. I didn't look back. I couldn't. My only thought was to reach my car, throw myself inside, and drive until the horizon swallowed this place forever. But when I stumbled to the spot where I had parked, the world tilted. The car was gone. Nothing remained but wet gravel, the faint indentation of tires already filling with dark water. My headlights, my reflection in the mirrors, the only anchor I had left. All of it had been erased as though it had never existed. The lot stretched empty, silent, the canopy sagging overhead like a grave marker. Then I saw the pump. It stood crooked, paint flaked away, its faded numbers flickering weakly in the dim light. The nozzle dangled free, swaying faintly as though it had only just been set down. A thin liquid dripped from its mouthpiece, pattering slow onto the gravel below. Not fuel, blood. Dark, thick, each drop clinging before falling, the sound sharp in the suffocating silence. My stomach lurched, bile burning my throat. The smell hit next, copper and iron, raw and unmistakable. I staggered back, nearly slipping, but my eyes couldn't tear away. The hose twitched, curling like a living thing. The nozzle tilted toward me, dripping steady, a line of red spreading across the gravel like veins. The pump hummed faintly, a vibration that traveled up through the ground into my bones. I turned, desperate for another way out. The lot stretched forever now, no road leading back to the highway, no curve where I had entered. Only darkness pressing close at the edges, swallowing the world whole. Behind me, the pump clicked. The sound was mechanical, precise, the same way it had when I'd filled my tank earlier, but my tank was gone. There was nothing left to receive it. Yet the counter spun, numbers dragging across the dim screen, measuring something I could not see. A wet splash struck my shoe. I looked down. A thick smear of blood spread across the gravel, inching toward my feet, dark threads branching outward like roots searching for purchase. The nozzle swung harder now, jerking on its hose, spraying a fine mist of crimson into the air. The metallic stench coated my tongue. I stumbled back, heart thrashing, and saw the reflection of my own pale face in the pump's glass. My eyes stared back hollow, skin already graying, lips cracked. The pump clicked again, louder, final. The nozzle dropped from its hose entirely, landing at my feet with a wet slap. The blood didn't drip anymore, it poured. And in the glass of the pump, my reflection didn't match. It was smiling, wide, sharp, waiting. The night dissolved into a blur of mist and red. I don't remember how I escaped. Only the sound of my own heartbeat pounding louder than the hiss of the pump, louder than the steady splash of blood hitting gravel. At some point, my feet found the road again, though it didn't feel like road at all. Only endless black stretching beneath me until I stumbled into unconsciousness. When I woke, the sun had risen. Pale light bled across the horizon, warm enough to sting my eyes, cruel in its ordinariness. I stood on the shoulder of the highway, clothes stiff with dried rain, mouth dry as ash. My car was gone, as though it had never existed. The lot where the gas station had been stretched beside me, empty and bare. Only the mile marker remained. 61. A crooked white post, its paint chipped, its numbers faded from years of weather. I staggered across the gravel, my legs heavy, my mind refusing to catch up with what my eyes showed me. Where the canopy had loomed, there was only wild grass, broken bottles, and tire ruts long overgrown. No pump, no shop, not even a concrete foundation. The space was as hollow as if nothing had ever been built there. A pickup slowed as it passed, the driver leaning out with a concerned frown. He asked if I was all right, if I needed a ride into town. My voice cracked as I asked the question I already dreaded. The gas station here, when did it close? The driver's brow furrowed. Ain't never been a gas station here, not in my lifetime. Just mile marker 61, nothing else. He left me staring at the bare ground, dust curling under the heat of the morning sun. I walked for hours after, every step dragging me farther from that cursed place. But the stench clung to me still, the faint tang of copper, the iron bite of blood soaked into my clothes and skin. By the time I reached town, my throat was raw. I asked again, to the first locals I met, desperate for someone to confirm what I had seen. Each one gave me the same answer, casual and certain. Mile marker 61. Just empty highway. No station, no pumps, no attendant. Never had been. Their words rolled off like truth carved in stone. But I couldn't believe them. Not when I could still feel the grit of gravel under my palms, still hear the pump clicking steadily as the nozzle bled red. That night, I checked the glove box of a borrowed car. My fingers brushed something heavy, metallic. The nozzle. Coiled inside like it had always belonged there, its tip still damp, leaving a faint smear of crimson across my hand. And in the silence that followed, I swore I heard the familiar click of the pump again. Counting, always counting, as though the tank was never full. The night pressed down heavy, a sky without stars, only the faint glow of my headlights carving tunnels through the dark. I'd been driving for hours, at least it felt that way. But time had gone soft, slipping away like water through my fingers. The hum of the tires blurred into a drone that set my teeth on edge, steady and endless, the rhythm of a machine caught in its own loop. The first time I saw the sign, I didn't think much of it. Mile marker 47. I glanced at it, shrugged, and let it pass into the dark behind me. 10 minutes later, another green post caught my headlights. Mile marker 47. My chest tightened. I gripped the wheel harder. Maybe I'd missed the next one. Maybe the markers out here hadn't been replaced in years. Maybe they were all rusting copies of each other. But when the third one passed, bold and green against the black. It said the same thing. 47. The fuel gauge dipped lower. My hands were slick on the wheel. The radio hissed static no matter which dial I turned, as if the road itself was swallowing the signal. The mist thickened along the ditches, swallowing the edges of the highway until it felt like I was suspended in nothing. 47 again. My throat dried, my breath rattling too loud in the cabin. The signs gleamed brighter than they should, reflective paint catching the beams, glaring into my eyes. I slowed down, leaned closer, staring at the posts as though they'd change if I watched long enough. But they didn't. Each one was fresh, crisp, as if it had just been planted. I tried counting seconds, forcing myself to measure the distance, to prove I was moving forward. But when I reached 60 and the next sign slid past, it mocked me. 47. The road itself began to feel unfamiliar, even though it was the only thing I'd seen. The cracks in the asphalt formed patterns I swore I'd noticed before. A long smear of oil curved into a crescent moon. A dead raccoon, stiff on the shoulder, its fur slick with dew. Then, 15 minutes later, the same smear. The same carcass. The same curve. My vision blurred. I shook my head hard. Knuckles, white on the steering wheel. But the repetition clung, undeniable. I wasn't covering ground. I wasn't moving anywhere at all. When I passed the sign again, I whispered it aloud, my voice cracking in the stale air. 47. My own tone mocked me. The wind carried it back, soft and overlapping, like more than one voice had spoken. The dashboard clock ticked forward, but time meant nothing here. The same stretch of asphalt stretched infinite. I pressed the accelerator, engine screaming, but the road didn't change. Mile marker 47 rose again, calm and patient, waiting for me like it had been expecting me all along. The wheel trembled under my grip, the whole car shuddering as though the highway itself was alive. And for the first time, I realized something chilling. The signs weren't repeating. They were following. The mist thickened until it clung to the windshield like frost, smearing the night into a dull blur. My eyes burned from squinting into it, hunting for proof that I hadn't gone mad. That's when the first billboard appeared, looming above the trees. It was a peeling advertisement for fried chicken, the kind with a cartoon rooster painted too bright, too cheerful for the decay streaking down its wooden face. The slogan read, "Finger-pickin' good," the letters warped by rain rot, but still visible in the beam of my headlights. I drove past, shaking my head at how out of place it looked on a deserted stretch of road. 10 minutes later, it was there again. The same rooster, the same warped grin, the same peeling paint. My stomach clenched. Maybe it was a chain of ads, I told myself. Highways were littered with them, every mile another reminder of where to stop and eat. But as the mist dragged me further into its maw, the rooster appeared again. This time, the paint was peeling in the exact same way. The crack ran straight through its left eye, leaving a tear-shaped gap in the wood. I gripped the wheel tighter, my jaw aching from the tension. Soon, another billboard loomed, rising pale in the fog. A smiling family of 4, frozen in black and white cheer, holding bottles of soda. Drink fizz, feel alive. The words stretched in bubbly font, faded at the edges. The faces seemed wrong, though. The longer I stared, the more their smiles sagged, their eyes hollowed, their teeth too sharp. I told myself not to look, not to notice. But 10 minutes later, there it was again. Same crack in the corner, same water stain spreading across the father's chest like a shadow of rot. The repetition clawed at me, scraping reason from my skull. My car surged forward, speedometer climbing, engine growling as I floored the gas. Asphalt hummed beneath me, mile marker after mile marker. And still, the billboards returned. The rooster, always smiling. The family, always drinking. A woman in a swimsuit advertising cigarettes. Her features washed out, blurred, her body warped at the edges as though the paint itself was melting. Every one of them repeated, not similar, the same. Each blemish, each tear, each shadow. And then I noticed the faces shifting. The family on the soda billboard tilted their heads when I passed the third time. Subtle at first, barely noticeable. By the fourth, their smiles had grown too wide, their lips splitting faintly at the corners, their eyes catching light they shouldn't have. The chicken mascot tilted too, one wing raised like it was saluting me. The paint peeled further down its body, but the crack across its eye didn't change. It always stayed the same, like the loop was holding it still, freezing it in some grotesque perfection. The mist pressed thicker, muting everything. My headlights hit wood, paint, smiles, slogans, again and again and again. And when the next billboard rose, my heart stilled. It wasn't the rooster. It wasn't the family. It was me. A massive photograph of my own face stretched across the wood, my eyes staring wide, my lips cracked and pale. Beneath, the slogan read, "Keep driving. Always driving." The billboard still clung to my mind, my own face stretched across the boards like some cheap advertisement for madness. I forced my eyes to the road, hands slick against the wheel, heart hammering in my throat. That's when the radio crackled to life. It had been nothing but static for hours, a broken hiss that rose and fell with the hum of the tires. Now, though, a voice cut through. Flat, nasal, distorted, but clear enough to freeze me where I sat. This just in. Reports of a fatal accident near mile marker 47. The voice clicked away, dissolved back into static. My breath snagged in my chest. It had to be coincidence, I told myself. Some old recording bleeding through the frequencies, some station half dead and drifting. But even as the thought came, the voice returned. Identical in tone, identical in rhythm. This just in. Reports of a fatal accident near mile marker 47. Not a replay, not a continuation. The exact same words, looped perfectly. I spun the dial, twisting it until my fingers ached. But no matter where the needle landed, the bulletin followed. Each time, the same announcement. The same pause between syllables. The same rasp at the edge of the word fatal. The road narrowed in my headlights, mist pressing in closer now, swallowing the tree line. My pulse raced as I reached to shut the radio off entirely, but the button stuck. The plastic wouldn't move. I slammed it with my palm, once, twice, but the voice droned on, indifferent. This just in. Reports of a fatal accident near mile marker 47. My breath fogged the windshield. My hands trembled against the wheel. And then I noticed something worse. Each time the bulletin repeated, it sounded closer. The static behind it faded, the distortion cleared, until the voice felt less like a broadcast and more like someone sitting in the passenger seat beside me, whispering the words against my ear. Couldn't stop myself. My eyes flicked to the empty seat, but it wasn't empty anymore. For just a heartbeat, in the corner of my vision, I saw the pale outline of someone slumped there, face hidden by shadow. When I whipped my head around, the seat was empty again, but the smell lingered. Burnt rubber, gasoline, blood drying on hot asphalt. The voice rasped once more, but this time the words shifted. This just in. Reports confirmed the victim was driving alone. I gripped the wheel harder, nails biting into my palms. I wanted to scream, to tear the radio out, but the road gave me no mercy. Out of the fog, the next sign loomed, reflective paint glaring bright in my lights. Mile marker 47. And as I passed it, the radio whispered the last line, so soft it nearly drowned beneath the hum of my tires. The crash has not yet happened. The needle dipped lower and lower, the orange glow of the fuel warning burning against the dark like a brand. I had been circling mile marker 47 for what felt like eternity. And still the tank drained as though the road demanded a toll for every lap. The hum of the engine grew hollow, sputtering faintly, each shudder a reminder that the end was near. Yet the road never ended. The mist pressed tighter, swallowing the tree line until it felt like I was suspended in a void, only asphalt beneath me and the same repeating markers on either side. The air thickened with the smell of gasoline, sharp and acrid, though I knew I hadn't spilled a drop. Sweat rolled down my neck, soaking into my collar, but the wheel stayed slick and cold in my hands, as though someone else were steering with me. And then came the lights. At first, just a faint glow in the mirror, easy to mistake for the trick of fatigue. But the red and blue strobes grew stronger, bleeding into the mist until they painted the inside of the car in violent pulses. My heart leapt at the thought of rescue. A police cruiser, maybe. Someone else caught in this loop who could pull me free. But the lights never closed the distance. No matter how fast I drove, no matter how sharp I pressed the pedal, the cruiser lingered behind me, locked at the same span of road. The siren stayed silent. Only the lights pulsed, steady and merciless, painting my reflection in the rearview mirror. And in that reflection, something shifted. The face staring back wasn't mine anymore. My jaw was too slack, my lips too pale, my eyes ringed dark like bruises. The red and blue bled across my face, making it look carved, grotesque, like the aftermath of something broken. I blinked hard, but the image clung. Each time I looked back, it was a little less me, a little more hollow. The fuel light began to blink. The engine coughed, the whole car lurching in protest. But the road stretched infinite still. The mist grew heavier, pressing against the windows like hands searching for a way inside. Another sign slid past, its reflective surface glaring in the beams. Mile marker 47. The radio crackled faintly, static biting, and I swore I heard the bulletin again, warped and distant. Fatal accident, near mile marker 47. The lights behind me flared brighter, closer now, until they burned like furnace doors in the mirror. My reflection dissolved in the glare, face swallowed whole in the strobing glow. I slammed the gas through the tank was dry, though the car rattled with hollow fury. My chest heaved, my throat raw from screams I hadn't realized had escaped. Still the lights kept pace, no nearer, no farther, locked in eternal chase. And then, as the engine coughed its last, the mirror flickered once more. The cruiser behind me wasn't empty anymore. Someone sat inside, hands on the wheel, staring straight at me, and it was my own ruined body driving. The car stuttered forward on fumes, every cough of the engine rattling through my bones. My chest burned with the weight of the radio's words, replaying over and over in my skull. Reports of a fatal accident near mile marker 47. The siren lights still bled into the mist behind me, though the cruiser itself had vanished, leaving only the sickening strobe of red and blue clawing at my reflection. Then the mist parted. For a moment, I thought I had broken free, that the loop had cracked open and spit me out into some new stretch of road. But the truth lay ahead. gleaming in the white beam of my headlights, and it locked every muscle in my body. The wreck. Twisted steel lay across the asphalt like the skeleton of something once alive, mangled and bent beyond repair. My stomach lurched when I recognized the shape beneath the ruin, my car. The same cracked windshield, the same dent in the bumper. The headlights still burned, frozen in time, glaring pale into the night. And then I saw him. Saw me. The body slumped in the driver's seat, chest pressed against the crumpled wheel, skin pale and slack under the merciless glow of those lights. My own face stared blankly back at the road, eyes glassy, mouth parted as though mid-scream. Blood traced black lines down my shirt, soaking the fabric until it glistened like oil. The tires screeched as I swerved, but the loop gave no space to escape. The wreck remained, anchored to the pavement, my dead self trapped inside. I passed it once, twice, 3 times. Each circuit showed it again, untouched, unchanging, headlights blazing forever at mile marker 47. The radio whispered, voice thin and breaking now, as though strained by the weight of its own prophecy. This just in. Reports confirmed the driver was alone. The mist swallowed the sound, but my own heart echoed the truth. I was the driver. I was the crash. The loop wasn't keeping me from disaster. It was trapping me in its aftermath, forcing me to witness my own death, mile after mile after mile. Each pass made the body look worse. Skin sagged, eyes sank deeper, blood darkened to tar. And yet, the headlights never dimmed. They stayed bright, unblinking, as though the car itself refused to release me. I gripped the wheel until my nails tore skin, but I couldn't stop. The road dragged me forward, past the same carcass of metal and flesh again and again, until I no longer knew if I was the one driving or the one decaying. The last time I passed, something changed. The body's head turned. Slowly, impossibly, my dead self raised its gaze from the wheel, eyes locking onto mine through shattered glass. My own lips moved, voice seeping into the cabin, though the corpse was yards away. Keep driving. And as the words curled into my ear, the headlights of the wreck flared blinding white, swallowing the road, swallowing the loop, leaving me nowhere to go but forward into death already waiting.